The girl transmigrated into a novel as the lovesick villainess. Because her behavior was drastically different from before, her father assumed she was heartbroken over the crown prince. So he arranged a blind date for his daughter with the most eligible bachelor. But Yvonne just wanted to be a stay-at-home daughter, living off her family's wealth. In her past life, she had lived a life constantly under pressure, in an environment full of traps and deceit, walking on eggshells. She dreamt of being a wicked villainess, even if it meant enduring the scorn and accusations of others. However, she could never change the reality of being born with a silver spoon in her mouth. Finally, one day, she was chosen by the Truculent of reincarnation. She opened her eyes to find herself transformed into the wicked villainess she had always dreamed of being. A mere frown brought a maid rushing to her side. Waking up meant a sumptuous breakfast. Yvonne could hardly believe her dream had come true, and her life truly was that of a villainess. In the original story, after the male and female leads got engaged, she made a pact with a demon and turned evil. Due to her exceptional magical talent, she became the most feared enemy of the protagonists. But Yvonne had no intention of letting herself meet such a tragic end. Her family was a long-established lineage of mages. Her father was the most powerful mage tower master in the empire and the head of the Asinthorth family. Moreover, her family owned countless gem mines. With her stunning figure, breathtaking beauty, and outstanding magical talent, she didn't need any man. Yvonne lay in bed, fantasizing about her perfect future life. She only needed to applaud the protagonist's sweet love from afar. Staying away from them meant she wouldn't become a dark mage. Just then, a maid whispered that the Duke had arrived, startling Yvonne into a flustered scramble to get up. Her father, with a stern expression, demanded to know if Yvonne had been reflecting properly. Before transmigrating, the original Yvonne had thrown a bomb at the protagonist's date spot. Because of this, her father, the Duke, had confined her to her room for a week as punishment. Although it was supposed to be confinement, Yvonne merely spent her time eating, drinking, and enjoying herself. She couldn't help but wonder if her father was disgusted by her indolence. I'm quietly reflecting, she insisted. But her father didn't believe his daughter would ever be truly quiet. He quickly summoned his aide and instructed him to give Yvonne some work to do. Seeing the aide desperately trying to dissuade the Duke from being so harsh on his daughter, Yvonne couldn't help but wonder if she had to work overtime even after transmigrating. Learning that it was only 6 hours a day, Yvonne breathed a sigh of relief. Before leaving, her father sternly ordered her to complete the tasks properly, or else he would disown her. It wasn't just her father. Her brother also seemed to despise her, although her family didn't seem to like her. For Yvonne, an orphan in her past life, having a family made her somewhat happy. She was grateful they hadn't kicked her out. When the Duke received the completed work from his daughter, his jaw nearly dropped. Yvonne had used a table format for the records, allowing for a clear overview of the trade group sales figures. Even the Duke, her father, wore a satisfied expression. The aide beside him began showering her with praise, saying Yvonne had always been incredibly intelligent. The Duke suddenly sensed something was amiss. He summoned his daughter's maid. When the Duke inquired about Yvonne's recent behavior, the maid immediately panicked and recounted how the young miss had been very despondent lately, only eating 3 meals a day. She even tidied up the office desk in her spare time. The Duke grew increasingly alarmed as he listened. His daughter never helped him with work, and she had always eaten 6 meals a day since she was a child. The Duke immediately began searching for the reason behind his daughter's transformation. It must have been the Crown Prince. He must have dumped Yvonne, severely wounding her pride. He wondered if his daughter was still pining for the Crown Prince, unaware that Yvonne was currently in her room, enjoying some fruit. After the fruit, she would have dessert and then lie down for a pleasant nap. But the Duke, her father, had already completely demonized the Crown Prince in his mind. His daughter was beautiful and noble, and she had pursued him so passionately. Yet he had deliberately dated a bastard princess from another country. Furious, he slammed his fist on the table, thinking that the bomb Yvonne had thrown at him was too lenient. Yvonne, who had just been summoned by her father, rushed in and asked what had happened. She worried that something was wrong with the work she had submitted. She apologized to her father, saying she had tried her best. Hearing his daughter apologize, the Duke thought he had misheard. He quickly praised Yvonne for doing a good job. Realizing he wasn't angry with her, Yvonne's worried heart finally settled, and a bright smile bloomed on her face. But the Duke found it unsettling. His daughter had never cared about his praise before, and she often caused him trouble. To solidify her position as a permanent shut-in, Yvonne hastily declared that she would continue to reflect deeply in her room. Before she could finish, the Duke interrupted her. He explained that he only wanted her to reflect, not to become despondent. He told Yvonne that he had bought an empty house for her to use as she pleased to vent her frustrations. The aide explained that the Duke had cast a sealing spell around the house so that her magic wouldn't affect anyone else. But for the current Yvonne, she couldn't bear to destroy something for no reason. Noticing her father's determined expression, Yvonne meekly admitted she deserved to be punished and therefore didn't need to destroy a house. But this behavior completely infuriated the Duke. He was now fully convinced that the blasted crown prince was the reason for his daughter's sudden change in personality. Fortunately, the aide beside him stopped the Duke in time. Moreover, Yvonne's display of admiration for her father's powerful magic made the Duke feel a bit embarrassed. He then asked Yvonne if there was anything she wanted. If she wanted to fall in love, he'd find her a man 100 times better than that good-for-nothing crown prince. Unexpectedly, Yvonne said she wanted to study. This left everyone present in disbelief. So, the Duke prepared many books for his daughter. Back in her room, Yvonne read while enjoying some snacks. This shut-in life was pure bliss. She then began fantasizing about wielding magic like her father, but she couldn't understand any of the magical knowledge in the books. So, she decided to try practical training. Full of confidence, she assumed the posture for casting a spell. Just as she was about to chant the incantation, someone suddenly opened the door without warning. It was Baden, her brother, who, in the original story, considered Yvonne a mad dog. Yvonne panicked and asked what he was doing there. Apparently, Yvonne's recent diligence in organizing spreadsheets and studying had led Baden to mistakenly believe she was vying for the dukedom. Feeling misunderstood, Yvonne clenched her fists in frustration and explained that she only wanted to help him protect the family. Baden had never imagined Yvonne would help him. Yvonne then gave an example. The intervals between monster wars were getting shorter. In the past, the wars occurred every 10 years, now it was every 5. The next one would be in 3 years, and on an even larger scale. Although Baden was aware of this, he still wanted to know where Yvonne got her information. Helpless, she fabricated a story about gleaning it from her historical studies. Seeing her seemingly serious data tables, Baden reluctantly accepted her explanation. However, he still couldn't believe his sister would obediently help him. To dispel his suspicion, Yvonne put on a tragic act, claiming she only wanted to help him and their father and live a peaceful life. Baden, confused, asked what brother. Slightly impatient, Yvonne called him brother again. Now Baden was convinced his sister had gone mad. He immediately went to their father and asked about Yvonne's condition. The Duke shot up from his chair. You think Yvonne is strange too? After all, neither of them had ever been called brother or praised by Yvonne before. Moreover, Yvonne's obsession with knowledge had even made her teachers shudder. After a discussion, the father and son attributed Yvonne's change to the crown prince. The Duke decided to arrange a blind date for Yvonne. He thought that perhaps dating a man 100 times more handsome than the crown prince would improve her mood. Recalling Yvonne's past dating experiences, both men chuckled darkly. Meanwhile, a handsome man received an invitation to the capital. To prevent his daughter from being lovesick any longer, her father arranged a blind date for her with the most eligible bachelor in the empire. Yvonne merely glanced at the royal palace, and her father hastily covered her eyes with a cloak. Her brother even went directly to the crown prince and told him not to flatter himself into thinking Yvonne still liked him. Not long ago, her father had sent an invitation to heirs to come to the capital. The letter also included an ancient contract. It was a contract Heir's father had signed, promising to agree to anything as repayment for a past favor. Therefore, even though his aides strongly advised against it, Heir's insisted on going to the date with the infamous villainess. He also wanted to see just how terrible this villainess was. Later, Yvonne's family took her shopping. Everywhere they went, people avoided her. This made Yvonne even more afraid to go out. Her brother teased her, saying her reputation preceded her. After getting out of the carriage, Yvonne was fascinated by the bustling market street. But her brother thought she was just reacting this way because she hadn't been out in a while. This was, after all, the very place she had bombed not long ago. He leaned in and whispered, asking if she wanted to throw another bomb. At that moment, Yvonne's gaze drifted towards the magnificent royal palace in the distance. Quickly, a cloth covered her eyes. Her father nervously told her not to look at that place anymore. Even her brother said she was being too lovesick. It was then that Yvonne realized they still mistakenly believed she was pining for the crown prince. But to them, Yvonne's explanation sounded like she was trying to act indifferent after being dumped. To cheer her up, her father took her to a clothing store. The staff's attitude was completely different from what Yvonne remembered. Usually, when she came alone, they would gossip about her. Perhaps in everyone's eyes, Yvonne was an outcast. However, her sadness lasted less than a second. Her father and brother called her over and immediately ordered the staff to bring out all the clothes that would suit her. Yvonne finally relaxed into a genuine smile. How others saw her didn't matter. As long as her family cared, that was enough. She tried on a mountain of clothes, each one making her look even more radiant. This made choosing nearly impossible. Both her father and Baden couldn't help but sigh. Yvonne truly was the most beautiful girl in the empire. Then, pointing at a pair of red high heels, her father instructed the staff to pack up everything except those dangerous shoes. After their shopping spree at the clothing store, the Duke and Baden took Yvonne to another shop she used to frequent. Yvonne watched, amused, as her father picked up item after item, declaring each one perfect for her, and as Baden urged her to try this and that. She couldn't help but laugh. This warm, familial affection was something she had never experienced in her previous life. Noticing her smile, both her father and Baden immediately flocked to her like puppies. The Duke told her that her smile reminded him of her mother. His words warmed Yvonne's heart. Then, seemingly out of the blue, Baden suggested they go for tea. The way they chimed in together made Yvonne suspect they had planned this beforehand. At the cafe, her father ordered a mountain of pastries. Yvonne felt a little exasperated. All she wanted was to go back to her room and study. Besides, she had no occasion to wear all those new clothes. Her father slammed his hand on the table, declaring that there would be an opportunity. In 3 days, she had a blind date with a good man, and the meeting place, this very cafe. Yvonne realized her father had been serious. Before Yvonne could complain, Baden began describing her blind date. The man was the head of the heir's dukedom and a master swordsman. Yvonne had heard of him. He was said to be the object of every young lady's affection. But she couldn't help but wonder why such an outstanding man would agree to meet with someone like her, a villainess with such a terrible reputation. Hearing this, her father angrily stood up, threatening to teach a lesson to whoever dared to spread such rumors. Baden also comforted her, assuring her that she was a great catch. Seeing both of them fiercely defending and comforting her, Yvonne was momentarily speechless with gratitude. Shortly after, both her father and Baden excused themselves, leaving her alone. The warm feeling Yvonne had just experienced from her father and brother's affection was immediately shattered by the sight of the blonde-haired young man before her. He yawned, his movements languid, and his attitude a stark contrast to the respectful demeanor he had displayed in front of her father. Yvonne, deciding to teach him a lesson, told him there was a bug on his arm. She then lightly swatted his arm. To her surprise, that light tap sent him tumbling to the ground in pain. Yvonne stared at her hand. She hadn't realized she possessed such strength. Suddenly, she gasped. She noticed her shadow had, at some point, transformed into a grotesque, writhing mass of purple. The girl had transmigrated into the body of the villainess. Because her behavior was so drastically different, her father assumed she was heartbroken over being dumped by the crown prince. So, he arranged a blind date for her with the most handsome man in the empire. Even her brother went to confront the crown prince. However, what Baden didn't expect was that the crown prince, upon hearing that heirs had arrived in the capital, had already guessed the reason for his visit, Yvonne. Baden was trying to figure out how to explain the situation when the crown prince approached him, haughtily commenting on Yvonne's recent diligence in her studies. He arrogantly assumed she was doing it all to become crown princess. He then feigned regret, stating that the position of crown princess belonged to another princess. This infuriated Baden, but he still told the crown prince not to worry, as Yvonne had moved on with her life. The Crown Prince, however, mistook Baden's words for bravado. He couldn't fathom the idea of Yvonne not liking him. He told Baden to convince Yvonne to give up on him. His narcissistic and arrogant attitude made Baden want to tear him apart. Suddenly, Baden noticed a handprint on a nearby tree. He took out a magical tool to record it. But when he alerted the Crown Prince to the anomaly behind him, the handprint vanished. The Crown Prince, oblivious, continued rambling about Yvonne. Finally, Baden's face darkened. He told the Crown Prince not to bother. Yvonne had long forgotten about him. Furthermore, neither he nor their father wanted Yvonne to become the Crown Princess. Without giving the Crown Prince a chance to respond, Baden bowed curtly and left. Though Baden wasn't entirely sure if Yvonne still harbored any feelings for the Crown Prince, he was determined to keep his sister away from that scumbag. Earlier, Yvonne had discovered her shadow had transformed into a grotesque purple mass. Startled, she stomped on it. To her surprise, it snarled. Yvonne stomped on it a few more times. Finally, her shadow returned to normal. But when Yvonne asked the blonde-haired young man about what had just happened, he claimed to have seen nothing. After Yvonne vanquished the creature, an injured person appeared at the royal palace. And on a certain tree, they left a handprint. Returning home from her shopping trip, Yvonne gifted her maid a piece of lace trim. Yvonne's maid, overjoyed by the gift of lace, sang and danced, thanking her profusely at least 300 times. Afterwards, Yvonne began poring over books, searching for anything related to shadow monsters. The thought that someone might be targeting her filled Yvonne with unease. Despite her thorough search, she couldn't find a single clue. Hoping her original self might have left some answers, she casually asked her maid if she remembered any instructions about things that shouldn't be touched. As expected, the maid immediately became flustered, assuring Yvonne that she hadn't touched anything in Milady's Cannonball Workshop, otherwise known as the Artifact Research Room, specifically the cabinet to the right of the desk. Knowing the location, Yvonne smiled faintly and instructed her maid to ensure no one else touched anything in there. The maid, her face a picture of innocent obedience, confirmed she would follow Yvonne's previous instructions. If any intruders were discovered, she would retaliate with the ear-shaped bomb. Looking at her seemingly harmless maid, Yvonne couldn't help but think truly Yvonne's maid. Later that night, Yvonne crept into the Cannonball Workshop, only to find that its interior was completely different from what she had imagined. Neatly arranged test tubes and magical potions filled the space. After locating the desk the maid had mentioned, she discovered a diary and a book hidden in the drawer. She decided to examine the diary first, but despite her best efforts, she couldn't open it. Resigned, she turned her attention to the other book. As she flipped through its pages, she was astonished to discover it was about magical amnesia. This meant the original Yvonne had suffered from this ailment and had been secretly searching for a cure. Yvonne also learned that her recent inability to use magic was a symptom of the disease. Fortunately, the book revealed the key to treatment: consistently consuming a powder made from a rare, high-grade magic stone. However, the stone's price was exorbitantly high. Just 1 kilogram cost a staggering 10 billion units of currency. The next day was Yvonne's blind date with Ayers. Ayers, dressed impeccably, prepared to leave early. His handsome and imposing figure moved his servants to tears. Meanwhile, Yvonne was preoccupied. She asked her maid about the details of her finances, only to be informed that all of her assets were tied up in the Magical Merchants Guild. In other words, Yvonne was broke. Realizing she was penniless, Yvonne grew even more anxious about the threat to her life. What would happen if it was discovered she couldn't use magic? She requested a magical communication device from her maid and contacted the Gem Merchants Guild. She learned that the magic stone cost 20 million gold coins per gram and was practically impossible to obtain. Dejected, Yvonne arrived at the meeting place, still contemplating selling her clothes to raise funds. She was so lost in thought that she barely registered the whispers around her. It wasn't until Ayers called out to her that she remembered she was on a blind date. Though he was undeniably gorgeous, and she was tempted to suggest a second meeting, she knew he had been tricked by her father. A quick end to the date would be best for both of them. So, Yvonne decided to scare him off. Spreading her hands and flashing a bright smile, she asked if he could lend her some money. She expected him to be speechless and storm off, but instead he calmly asked how much she needed. Panicked, Yvonne blurted out that she urgently needed 20 billion gold coins. She then watched as Ayers reached inside his jacket. Seeing him pull out a pen, Yvonne instinctively assumed the master swordsman was about to silence her permanently. But Ayres simply began writing on a piece of paper. Yvonne noticed his long, beautiful eyelashes. His hair looked incredibly soft. Looking at his handsome face, she couldn't help but relax slightly. Then, she noticed his long, slender fingers. Following his hand, she realized he was writing furiously on a check. It dawned on Yvonne that he was serious. She lunged forward to stop him, accidentally grabbing his hand. They both froze. Yvonne quickly pulled her hand away. Apologizing profusely, she stammered that even though the Duke was known for his kindness, he shouldn't lend money so readily. Ayres chuckled, explaining that he wasn't being careless. She was the daughter of House Arzenhortz, and this was his personal money. Even if he were being scammed, there was nothing he could do. Yvonne muttered that anyone on a blind date with such a strange person should run. Ayres set down his teacup, gazing intently at Yvonne. He leaned closer and whispered, "Surely Milady isn't a strange person. Her father, wanting his daughter to get over her love-struck ways, set her up with the most handsome man in the Empire." But Yvonne's mind was preoccupied with earning money to buy the magic stone and cure her amnesia. She decided to end the blind date early. Asking the Duke for 20 billion gold coins on their first meeting, she hoped he would be deterred. Instead, to her surprise, the Duke's unhesitating response, pulling out a pen and checkbook, left her flustered. As he began writing, Yvonne realized he was serious and frantically tried to stop him. When Yvonne asked why he didn't run from such a strange person, the Duke leaned in close and whispered, "Surely Milady isn't a strange person. I don't need to run away, do I?" Their eyes met briefly, and Yvonne, flustered and shy, abruptly excused herself. The Duke, ever thoughtful, offered to escort her home, expressing his desire to get to know her better. Though tempted, Yvonne declined his offer, worried her reputation as a villainess would cause him trouble. The Duke then asked if she would grant him one request, to address each other by name at their next meeting. Taking her hand, he said, "Milady, call me Lednane." He gently kissed the back of her hand. In that moment, Yvonne's heart, dormant for 2 lifetimes, finally felt alive. With a genuine smile, she replied, "All right, Lord Lednane." Lednane seemed momentarily captivated by her radiant expression. After the blind date, Yvonne found herself in a nearby square. The time spent with the Duke, though brief, had been blissful. However, she knew he was beyond her reach, and they would likely never meet again. Just then, she noticed someone approaching. Judging by the golden hair, it had to be the Crown Prince. How persistent, he thought. She comes to see me even on the day of her blind date. This was the last person Yvonne wanted to see. Adopted by the current Empress, the Crown Prince was acutely aware of public perception and royal dignity. This made him particularly averse to Yvonne's notoriety, even refusing to wear purple or silver jewelry, colors associated with her. Yet, here he was, acting flirtatious. As Yvonne curtsied, she carefully observed him. In the novel, the Crown Prince was considered handsome, but having just met Lednane, Yvonne found him rather ordinary. Her scrutiny, however, was misinterpreted by the prince as a pleading gaze. "Am I bothering you? I'll leave then." The Crown Prince couldn't understand why he no longer held Yvonne's attention. Seeing her actually turn to leave, he impulsively grabbed her hand. The sudden, rough gesture caught Yvonne off guard. "Your Highness, are you holding my hand right now?" He released her hand. As the crowd grew, Yvonne decided a public declaration would make her intentions clear. She told him she had long forgotten him and would never bother him again, apologizing for her past behavior. But the greasy, golden-haired man seemed oblivious, proclaiming to everyone that her recent efforts were to become the crown princess. Even Yvonne's patience wore thin in the face of such audacity. Hearing him mention Duke Lednane infuriated her. Just then, Lednane arrived, gracefully draping his coat over Yvonne's shoulders and fixing the crown prince with an icy stare. Upon learning his identity, the crown prince's face paled. As the three formed a tense triangle, the whispers began. Some even suggested the Duke and the crown prince were the true lovers, with Yvonne as the interloper, making her want to unleash a barrage of explosives. Sensing her displeasure, Lednane suggested they leave for a quieter place, mentioning a forgotten gift. Realizing he was trying to help, Yvonne had an idea. She looped her arm through Lednane's, telling the crown prince that their blind date was still in progress, and they would excuse themselves to enjoy their time together. To her surprise, Lednane played along. He took her hand, confirming their supposed relationship. The crown prince frowned, watching them walk away hand in hand. A surprising sense of defeat, unfamiliar to his haughty nature, washed over him. Yvonne thanked Lednane, promising to repay his kindness. She knew he had only come on the blind date as a favor to her father and felt guilty for the ensuing drama. Lednane seemed lost in thought. Yvonne worried she had upset him. Suddenly, he stepped closer, his handsome, mature face inches from hers. On her first blind date, Yvonne found herself harassed by the greasy, golden-haired man the original Yvonne had been infatuated with. Thankfully, Duke Lednane came to her rescue. After leaving the scene, Yvonne apologized profusely to the Duke. Because of her, he had been needlessly troubled. Yet, the Duke's sudden closeness left her flustered. Yvonne was so nervous she could hear her own heart pounding. She saw his gentle, large hand lightly brush a strand of her hair. Yvonne squeezed her eyes shut, a mixture of anticipation and fear swirling within her. Then, the Duke gently plucked a fallen leaf from her hair. He then asked, seemingly changing the subject, "Didn't you say you would call me by my name?" But Yvonne was still lost in the moment of his touch. Seeing his calm and composed expression, Yvonne inwardly scolded him. Such actions could lead to misunderstandings. Back at home, the Duke couldn't settle down. He absent-mindedly loaded his coffee with cream cubes. Yvonne's gaze filled his thoughts, to the point where he completely ignored his adjutant's words. Suddenly, the Duke asked his adjutant, "Didn't you say before the blind date that I was handsome?" The bewildered adjutant replied, "You are handsome now, and you will be handsome in the future." This answer dissatisfied the Duke. How can I trust your aesthetic sense with an answer like that? It's not like it's just anyone's aesthetic sense. He then brought up how considerate Yvonne had been throughout their meeting. The adjutant wanted to say that the Duke must have been mistaken, but was interrupted. The Duke then confessed that strange things kept popping into his head. He explained, "I don't know why, but I can hear Yvonne calling my name. It's making my head spin." The adjutant chuckled and asked if the Duke had delivered the morning's gift. This jolted the Duke's memory. He recalled chasing after the maid to give her the gift, only to stumble upon Yvonne crying in front of the crown prince. Coupling this with Yvonne's later apology, he instantly constructed a narrative. The young lady, encountering the crown prince whom she had long admired, was overcome with distress and asked him, the Duke whom she disliked, to help her escape the scene. So, he told his adjutant that he wouldn't be returning to his territory for the time being and ordered him to investigate whether Yvonne had recently incurred any substantial debts. If you want to know why Yvonne, a member of the Asinthor's family, one of the wealthiest families in the empire, would be in such dire need of a large sum of money. Looking out the window, the Duke thought of Yvonne's gemstone-like eyes reflecting the sunset. He suddenly regretted not preparing a more valuable gift, unaware that the magic stone ring he had given her was precisely what she needed. Seeing the magic stone, which was approximately the size of a clock, Yvonne was moved to tears. She couldn't help but sigh. The Duke was truly the most perfect man in the world. Even the gift he prepared was exactly what she needed. Suddenly, her father and brother, Baden, burst into her room. They had heard that the crown prince had appeared at her blind date, but Yvonne was more worried about her father and brother. Due to their busy schedules, they both constantly looked exhausted. Yvonne's concern made them feel even more guilty. Despite her suffering, she was still worried about them. Her father apologized for making her go on the blind date, which led to her encounter with the crown prince. Yvonne reassured him she was fine and only felt sorry for the Duke for having to go on a blind date with someone like her. Her father and brother couldn't accept this self-deprecating remark. In their eyes, Yvonne was the kindest and most exceptional child in the family. Relieved, Yvonne smiled. She then asked her father if she could forget everything and focus on her career. Both her father and Baden agreed. It was better to invest her time in her career than waste it on romantic pursuits. Unexpectedly, Yvonne confessed that she didn't have the funds to start a business and asked her father if she could borrow 10 million gold coins, promising to repay him with interest. Baden, realizing it was merely the cost of a few outfits, offered to give her the money outright. However, Yvonne refused. She insisted on formally borrowing the money and writing an IOU to build trust with her father and brother. Her father, realizing his daughter's seriousness, agreed. Their family wasn't just a family of mages. They were also the owners of the Holes Trading Company. This would be a good opportunity for her to learn about business. That evening, the Duke called Baden in and told him that Yvonne hadn't mentioned the blind date at all, focusing solely on business. This surprised Baden. He cautiously reminded his father, "A person's heart doesn't change so easily. Perhaps she's just pretending to have moved on from her infatuation with the Crown Prince." The Duke's expression turned cold at the mention of the Crown Prince. Adrian only became Crown Prince because the Empress adopted him. That position could change at any moment. If he's removed from his position, he won't be able to ignore our family any longer. Baden clearly hadn't expected his father to get involved in the royal succession dispute for Yvonne's sake. After all, the Assenthor's family had never interfered with the royal family throughout history. The Duke explained that this was only one reason. The main reason was the Crown Prince's companion, the princess, who was too strange. Baden agreed. On the battlefield, the princess's healing magic far exceeded normal levels. The Duke then ordered Baden to investigate the princess and contact both the third prince's former and current partners. He also instructed him to invite the girl on a date. But when Yvonne saw the letter the maid handed her, she wasn't happy at all. In fact, her face turned pale and she broke out in a cold sweat. As the Empire's most notorious villainess, she suspected the Duke must have felt wronged by their blind date and was now suing her. Because she was the Empire's most notorious villainess, she assumed Duke Lednain felt humiliated by their blind date and was now suing her. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince had sent a list of past offenses she had committed. Her maid comforted Yvonne, saying that while she might have been a bit extreme in the past, the current Miss Yvonne was kinder than a nun in a convent. After calming down, Yvonne decided to read the Duke's letter first. She thought the Duke would, at most, ask for the magic stone ring back. After all, he had been quite gentle with her that day. With a Tuntura heart, Yvonne opened the envelope and began to read. To her surprise, the Duke merely expressed his concern that she might not like the gift and extended an invitation to the opera house. The maid exclaimed that the Duke must be head over heels for Yvonne and urged her to accept the invitation immediately. However, Yvonne was prepared to refuse. She was convinced the Duke had written the letter out of politeness, at her father's behest, although she truly didn't want to give up on such a perfect man. As for the Crown Prince's letter, Yvonne merely skimmed it. He had invited her to a tea party hosted by the princess. He even specifically instructed her not to use magic. Such an action was akin to treating her like a potential criminal. Besides, she had already told him she wasn't interested in him. Why did he keep bothering her? Inwardly, Yvonne labeled the Crown Prince as the worst kind of trash and a scoundrel. On the day of the tea party, the Crown Prince looked around at the assembled noble ladies, but couldn't find Yvonne. He felt a pang of disappointment. In the past, whenever he was present, young women would always find a way to be near him. Recalling the scene of Duke Ayres leading Yvonne away, he began to doubt his initial assumption. Could it be that Yvonne hadn't been trying to attract his attention after all? Just then, a woman linked her arm through his. It was Princess Kadiria of the neighboring Malay kingdom. The Crown Prince introduced the princess to everyone, explaining how her restorative magic had saved his life. Instantly, the crowd transformed into fawning admirers, showering her with compliments. Then, someone mentioned the blind date between Duke Ayres and the villainous Yvonne. The princess noticed the Crown Prince's expression darken. She quickly began to compliment the other ladies on their beautiful skin, successfully diverting the conversation. Meanwhile, Yvonne was out purchasing rhodia grass for a new business venture she had conceived. This grass was primarily used as a fever reducer. Although there were more effective ingredients on the market, rhodia grass was inexpensive and could be monopolized with limited funds. Furthermore, Yvonne knew from the original novel that it had another use. In the future, an unknown skin disease would spread amongst the nobility. The illegitimate princess had used this very herb to turn her unfavorable situation around. While the princess had distributed the rhodia grass for free, Yvonne had no intention of doing so. She planned to fully utilize the information she had gleaned from the novel to earn 20 billion gold coins. To maximize her profits, Yvonne intended to market the rhodia grass as a luxurious, all-natural, handmade cosmetic that could cure skin diseases. After disembarking from her carriage, Yvonne glanced towards the palace, remembering the Crown Prince's tea party. Let him entertain himself, she thought, and turned her attention back to her task. Just then, a gust of wind blew dust into her eyes, and her pitiful, tear-filled appearance was witnessed by none other than the Duke. The man was the dream lover of every woman in the Empire. Simply stepping outside would attract the gazes of countless women. Even an 80-year-old man couldn't help but admire his handsomeness. Yet, this perfect man had hopelessly fallen for the most notorious villainess. After a moment of shared gaze, the Duke couldn't contain his joy. Although his previous invitation had been rejected, this chance encounter made him truly happy. Yvonne, startled like a child caught cheating, broke out in a cold sweat. She told the Duke she still had some business to attend to, hoping to make her escape. Unexpectedly, he claimed to also have business on that very street and expressed his desire to accompany her. This surprised Yvonne. If the second invitation in his letter had been at her father's request, then what was the reason for this one? Yvonne suddenly felt wary of the Duke. In the original novel, Duke Ayres was only briefly mentioned and never truly appeared. This meant the current plot was deviating significantly from the original. But this novel was particularly fond of plot twists, like allies betraying each other. So, Yvonne flipped her hair and feigned impatience, hoping the Duke would find someone else to stroll with. However, as soon as she spoke, the Duke transformed into a dejected puppy. He hurried to her side. "This is just an excuse I made up to be with you. Can't you just pretend you don't know and agree?" Yvonne's heart nearly exploded at his words. Even the Duke's blonde-haired guard was taken aback by his behavior, complaining about Yvonne's heartlessness. The Duke then successfully began strolling with Yvonne, dismissing his guard to amuse himself elsewhere. Before Yvonne could worry about being unprotected and potentially harmed, Lednain then inquired about the absence of a guard. Yvonne suddenly realized that, according to the original story setting, she was a powerful mage and therefore didn't need a guard. Yvonne awkwardly explained that it was better to be safe than sorry. Lednain nodded in agreement, muttering about the sheer number of trash people in the world. Hearing the word trash, Yvonne assumed he was referring to her and nervously changed the subject, mentioning her upcoming shopping trip. Lednain simply acknowledged this, noting to himself that Yvonne enjoyed shopping. Yvonne felt strangely as though she were being interrogated. Her past misdeeds flashed through her mind, prompting her to defensively explain that she wasn't as extravagant as she used to be and even disliked luxury goods now. To her surprise, this caused Lednain to panic, asking if that meant she disliked jeweled dresses, shoes, and handbags. He sighed dejectedly, lamenting that he should have learned more about her before choosing a gift. Yvonne suddenly remembered the magic stone bracelet he had given her. She realized he had misunderstood her earlier comments and thought she disliked his gift. She couldn't help but laugh, then told him how much she cherished the bracelet, especially since the magic stone could potentially cure her magical amnesia. For the rest of their walk, Lednain bombarded Yvonne with questions, as if trying to compile a comprehensive encyclopedia entry about her. He even complimented her, saying she looked even more beautiful than before. Yvonne struggled to suppress her flustered excitement and was about to return the compliment when they were interrupted by another nobleman. The man's face lit up upon seeing Duke Lednain, and he eagerly tried to introduce his daughter to the Duke. Lednain, however, merely offered a polite greeting and quickly excused himself. Yvonne found his sudden coldness strange, having assumed he was generally affable to everyone. Unexpectedly, Lednain then apologized to Yvonne, explaining that he'd been asking too many questions, but that he was simply incredibly curious about her. This made Yvonne wonder if he truly harbored special feelings for her. The most handsome man in the Empire is confessing to the ugliest girl. She thought, "I'm not interested in anyone else. I'm only curious about you, Miss Yvonne." Looking at his confident and handsome face, Yvonne suddenly realized that someone as notorious as her shouldn't be experiencing such a sweet scenario. Usually, people were ashamed to be seen with her, and even servants felt free to insult her. But during this outing with Lednain, he had constantly tried to get closer to her, asking personal questions and making ambiguous statements about his curiosity. Therefore, she concluded that he must be feigning affection. She assumed he had some ulterior motive for interacting with her. However, unbeknownst to her, Lednain was simply hopelessly love-struck. Yvonne glanced at him nervously. He exuded an irresistible aura of dominance. She suspected he was a member of the Royal Secret Investigation Organization, an elite group responsible for handling sensitive, unpublicized cases rumored to have close ties to the four Grand Duke families. Yvonne reasoned that, aside from the arranged blind date, all of Lednain's actions were likely part of some mission. In the original novel, the Crown Prince had also spied on her due to her inherently vicious nature. As she thought this, she suddenly felt herself pulled into Lednain's arms. His strong hands steadied her, nearly shattering her composure. Thankfully, he gestured toward a tree in front of her, explaining he was preventing her from bumping into it, which helped her rationalize his actions as a tactic to lower her guard. She resolved to improve her reputation as a villainess. Soon, they arrived at an opulent cosmetics store. While browsing, Yvonne assessed whether the shop met her criteria for a potential partnership. Lednain suddenly commented that Yvonne looked beautiful even without makeup. His sweet words flustered her. However, Yvonne quickly recovered, interpreting his remark as a subtle reminder of her earlier claim to dislike luxury goods. Fortunately, she also found the shop's products excessively flamboyant. She suggested they visit another store. As they entered, the shop assistant politely greeted them. Yvonne was surprised that she wasn't treated with disdain due to her reputation and that the assistant correctly addressed both her and Lednain by name. Yvonne noticed a pleasant aroma filling the store and guessed that various herbs were infused into the cosmetics. She picked up a product and inquired about its ingredients. The assistant confidently explained the source of the fragrance and highlighted the shop's specialization in functional cosmetics and expertise in herb processing. She dabbed a bit of the product onto Yvonne's hand. Experiencing the unique scent, Yvonne felt confident that this shop could create the rhodia grass cosmetics she envisioned. She suddenly glanced at Lednain, who was idly standing by. Their eyes met, and he tilted his head, wondering what she wanted. Unbeknownst to him, Yvonne's mind was racing. Yvonne figured that while Lednain was likely surveilling her, the Crown Prince was ultimately responsible. She beckoned Lednain over. He immediately abandoned what he was doing and approached her, obedient as a puppy. She instructed him to hold out his hands and then proceeded to apply hand cream to them herself. As she did so, she marveled at the beauty of his hands. If anyone ever ends up marrying this man, she thought darkly, I'll have to throw a bomb at them. After she finished, Lednain remained motionless, frozen in place. Yvonne, realizing her forwardness, blurted out that she was trying to repay him for the bracelet, then fled the store. Hand cream for a swordsman. How stupid of me. She mentally berated herself. Lednain, quick on his feet, called after her, explaining that someone who practiced swordsmanship daily needed hand care even more. This stopped Yvonne in her tracks. News of their date somehow reached the palace tea party, where the Crown Prince overheard it. The Crown Prince was instantly agitated. He began to analyze the purpose and reason behind their outing. His narcissistic conclusion. Yvonne was trying to make him jealous. Unbeknownst to him, the once infamous villainess was occupying more and more space in his thoughts. Princess Kadiria's resentment towards Yvonne intensified as the Crown Prince abandoned her to pursue the rumor. She remembered a time when the Crown Prince wouldn't even glance at Yvonne. Now, his behavior and expression clearly radiated jealousy. Kadiria plucked a flower with a bloodstained hand, watching without pity as it withered in her grasp. At that moment, she spotted the young Duke of the Asynthoth's family in the courtyard. He was the only one who had witnessed her healing magic during the war and subsequently distanced himself. Kadiria decided to use him to win back the Crown Prince's attention. The unattainable, handsome Duke had willingly become just another fish in the villainess's pond. Upon returning home, Lednain asked his aide for advice on courting a woman. The aide, however, first reported on the background check Lednain had requested on Yvonne. The result, Yvonne had no debts. Lednain felt his heart sink. He had no idea how to express his feelings to someone who didn't need money or luxury goods. His aide advised him to give up, explaining that Yvonne's refusal of gifts was a polite rejection. To put it bluntly, Your Grace, you've been dumped. But then he remembered the hand cream. The aide's expression changed. She's built a high wall around herself, Your Grace, but she's left a small opening. Truly a villainess. Lednain, displeased by the aide's disparaging remarks, warned him against speaking ill of Yvonne. The aide quickly rephrased. Perhaps she's just farming you, Your Grace. Seeing Lednain's confusion, the aide explained a popular slang term, maintaining contact with someone interested in you without any intention of reciprocating. To his surprise, Lednain wasn't angry. Instead, he replayed the events of their date in his mind. He then declared, with a love-struck sigh, that being in Yvonne's farm was fine with him. He believed Yvonne, heartbroken by the trash Crown Prince, had closed herself off to love. He instructed his aide to send an invitation to the third prince, hoping to change the situation. Still giddy from Yvonne's gift, Lednain kept sniffing the hand cream on his hands. He beamed, recalling her comment that the rose scent suited him. Gazing at Yvonne's radiant smile, he was about to ask her out when his older brother appeared, interrupting him. His brother warned Yvonne that news of her date with Lednain had spread throughout the palace, then glared at Lednain for a full 5 minutes before finally offering a perfunctory greeting. Oblivious to the tension, Lednain cheerfully greeted his future brother-in-law and shook his hand, complimenting him on his resemblance to Yvonne and declaring him even more handsome than rumored. The brothers' hostility seemed to dissipate slightly at the unexpected praise. Yvonne inwardly marveled at Lednain's ability to charm both men and women. However, when Lednain invited them both to dinner, her brother's suspicion returned. He declined, explaining that Yvonne was determined to start a new life and that Lednain shouldn't interfere out of mere curiosity. He reminded Lednain that Yvonne had sworn off relationships to focus on self-improvement. Yvonne wanted to protest. It wasn't a real date, after all, but seeing Lednain's innocent expression, she felt too ashamed to speak. Her brother then took her arm and led her away. He took her by the arm and escorted her away. Back at home, Yvonne complained to her brother, Baden, that she hadn't been on a date. Baden didn't believe her for a second, having clearly seen the two of them chatting together in a seemingly intimate way. Yvonne teased Baden, saying he'd been captivated by the Duke as well, rendered speechless, and even sporting a love-struck expression. It turned out Baden's reason for preventing a relationship between Yvonne and Lednain was still the crown prince. He couldn't bear the thought of his lovesick sister experiencing another heartbreak. Just thinking about the crown prince's deplorable behavior made Baden's blood boil. If it weren't for the crown prince's status, Baden would have already dealt with him. Suddenly, Baden remembered the magical recording device he'd used in the palace courtyard to capture images of a strange hand. He dressed and prepared to review the recording, unaware that a gigantic, monstrous insect had appeared behind him. Yvonne, despite her reputation as a powerful mage, couldn't use magic. To save her brother from the clutches of the monster, she threw a simple bracelet with all her might, resolving the crisis. Just moments before, Baden had been about to review the information recorded in the bracelet. He had been unexpectedly attacked by the giant monster. While dodging the attack, the bracelet had rolled to the doorway. Baden then began chanting, casting defensive magic on himself, hoping to hold out until help arrived. However, the monster had preemptively used its magic to sever the connection between the room and the outside world. Furthermore, the monster was powerful, and Baden's defenses wouldn't last long. Just then, Yvonne thought she heard something. She asked the maid, who claimed to have heard nothing. Just as Yvonne dismissed it as her imagination, another loud noise reached her ears. She decided to investigate the source of the sound. She ended up at Baden's door. Yvonne pressed her ear against the door, trying to figure out what her brother was doing. She gasped, then ordered the maid to get help immediately. She was certain she'd heard the roar of a monster and the chanting of magic spells. When she opened the door, she was shocked by what she saw. Seeing Yvonne, Baden asked her to use attack magic to assist him. He didn't know that Yvonne couldn't use magic. At that moment, the monster spat poison at Yvonne, but she remained unharmed. Baden had cast a protective spell on her, blocking the attack. However, the next moment, the monster broke through Baden's defenses. Yvonne knew it was because she had inadvertently drawn on Baden's magic, causing his defenses to crumble. She wanted to help him, but her body trembled uncontrollably. Meanwhile, Baden continued to fight the monster. Yvonne had always been a skilled mage in Baden's eyes. Perhaps seeing a monster for the first time had paralyzed her with fear. But Baden couldn't defeat the monster alone. He yelled at Yvonne to snap out of it. The monster seized the opportunity and struck Baden with paralyzing poison, immobilizing him. He was quickly ensnared by the monster. He thought he might die there, but he wanted to try, at least, to get Yvonne to safety. At that critical moment, Yvonne noticed the bracelet at her feet. With all her might, she hurled the bracelet at the monster. It hit the creature squarely in the head. Yvonne urged Baden to escape while he had the chance. The monster, however, collapsed to the ground from the blow. Finally, after the little maid's calls for help, reinforcements arrived. As the monster fell, Princess Kaderia, who had been controlling it remotely with a magical orb, suffered a backlash, her nose bleeding profusely. The severed connection with the monster shortened her lifespan. She couldn't believe a mere bracelet could kill her monster. The shadow she had summoned previously being defeated was one thing, but this time she had sent a high-level monster to attack Baden. A shiver ran down her spine. She had used black magic to sever the connection. So how had the maid been able to call for help so quickly? It was as if someone had known her plan in advance. Gritting her teeth, she tried to convince herself it was just a coincidence. Just a coincidence, but one that had cost her dearly. She decided to personally investigate whether the maid knew anything. Elsewhere, Yvonne and Baden's father, having seen the monster that attacked his children, still couldn't believe such a creature could appear in his home. Baden confirmed that it had appeared suddenly after his bath, likely entering through the window. But Yvonne said the window had been tightly shut. Could the monster have followed her home from the battlefield? Their father dismissed this possibility. Such monsters were summoned by black mages at the cost of their own lifespan, forming a tight bond that prevented them from straying too far. This meant the black mage was in the capital. Upon hearing this news, Yvonne couldn't help but feel a surge of anxiety. Her life could be in danger at any moment. She guessed that the shadow monster that had attacked her before was also the black mage's doing. Thinking that her father, the Lord of the Magic Tower, should know something about black mages, she hesitated about whether to ask him. Suddenly, she remembered that in the original story, Baden eventually becomes a black mage. Her mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps Baden becoming a black mage wasn't for his own benefit. This thought disheartened her. She had assumed that as long as she didn't act like a villainess, he wouldn't turn to the dark side. Just then, her father asked how the monster had been defeated. Baden pulled out a deformed bracelet and explained. Yvonne defeated the monster with one blow using this. Her father looked at Yvonne incredulously and asked if it was true. After confirming the story, he asked why she hadn't used magic. Yvonne didn't know how to answer. She considered using this opportunity to confess her inability to use magic. The best-case scenario would be her father immediately buying her 20 billion worth of magic stones. The worst-case scenario, both her father and brother would be disappointed in her. Thinking that she didn't have enough trust built with them, she decided against it. Just then, Baden took the initiative and claimed responsibility. He said that because he'd been captured by the monster, Yvonne couldn't use magic in that situation without risking injuring him. However, Yvonne knew that she had had plenty of opportunities to use magic before that. Could it be that Baden knew she couldn't use magic and was covering for her? Baden then gave Yvonne a knowing smile, confirming that he was indeed protecting her. This touched Yvonne. It turned out her brother had always been good to her. After hearing Baden's explanation, their father believed that Yvonne had used brute force to defeat the monster. This kind of strength was clearly inherited from their mother, a strikingly beautiful knight. She had once caught a brown bear with her bare hands during a royal hunting competition, which had captured her father's attention. Hearing their parents' bizarre love story caused both Yvonne and Baden to fall silent. Their father coughed awkwardly and said he would investigate the monster incident later. At that moment, Baden brought up another important matter. Duke heirs had been hovering around Yvonne lately and often bothered her. Rumors of their dates had spread throughout the palace and the academy. Because Ayres was known as a flirt, Baden was worried Yvonne would be deceived by him. Yvonne was utterly bewildered by her brother's words. She wanted to explain that she and the Duke were completely innocent, but her father had already issued a stern order forbidding any contact between the Duke and Yvonne. If Ayres dared to flirt with Yvonne again, he wouldn't let him off the hook. Just then, a servant reported from outside the door that a guest had come to visit Lady Yvonne. This news surprised both Baden and their father. It was the first time in Yvonne's life that someone had come to visit her at home. At that moment, Princess Cordelia stood at the entrance of the mansion, holding a gift box. After transmigrating into the novel, the girl had unintentionally become the heroine's rival, and now the heroine had come to her door. Yvonne carefully observed Cordelia as she sipped her tea. It was said that the heroine was as lovely as the spring sunshine. To see her would make people feel warm. She also possessed the ability to calm monsters. Now, this magical figure is right in front of Yvonne, but Yvonne didn't remember this scene in the original story. They sat in silence for a long while. Finally, Cordelia put down her teacup and addressed the matter at hand. I apologize for this sudden visit, and thank you for your warm hospitality, Lady Yvonne. Actually, I thought you wouldn't see me. I know you don't like me. Cordelia's words dripped with false sweetness, leaving Yvonne speechless. But to try and disarm her, Yvonne admitted that she hadn't liked the princess in the past, but now she had no reason to dislike her. Suddenly, Kadiria's eyes filled with tears. As if she hadn't understood Yvonne's words, she asked, "Does that mean you're very confident you'll win the crown prince's heart?" Yvonne was completely taken aback. In reality, Kadiria wasn't a naive innocent. She had 3 objectives for this visit. The first was to confirm how much Yvonne knew about her. The second was to destroy the bracelet Baden had used to record her handprint. The third was to ensure Yvonne wouldn't interfere with her plans. Her seemingly pointless chatter was a smokescreen to avoid suspicion. So, she quickly brought up Yvonne's supposed date with Duke Ayres. Then, feigning sadness, she said, "I thought you were trying to forget the crown prince. I thought it meant you approved of my relationship with His Highness." Yvonne calmly replied that she indeed had no feelings for the crown prince. "Then why did you deliberately make yourself so conspicuous in front of His Highness?" "Lady Yvonne, you specifically chose a location near the palace to meet with the Duke so that the news would spread quickly. I heard this is a common tactic in social circles, spreading rumors with influential members of the opposite sex to attract the attention of others. Will Lady Yvonne admit that in order to gain the crown prince's attention, you used the naive and innocent Duke Ayres?" Kadiria's words were a smokescreen to achieve her goals, but they left Yvonne feeling incredibly uncomfortable. They also infuriated her father, who was eavesdropping at the door. Fortunately, Baden was there to stop their father from storming in and tearing Kadiria to shreds. He urged his father to stay calm, explaining that his interference would only make Yvonne look worse. But their father couldn't swallow this insult. He asked if there had been any news regarding his recent inquiry to the third prince. Meanwhile, the third prince had received letters from both Yvonne's father and Duke Ayres. He burned them without hesitation. He wasn't planning on having any further contact with either of them. He needed to protect the peaceful life he shared with his mother. 18 years ago, the Empress had lost 2 sons. With no heir, the Emperor, who was also the Empress, adopted the 4th prince, Adrian, and made him crown prince. But by birth order, the 3rd prince should have been the heir. Even the ministers gossiped about why the Empress would abandon the gifted 3rd prince and choose the unremarkable 4th prince as crown prince. They petitioned the Emperor about the matter. The 3rd prince was summoned by the Emperor because of this. But the Emperor, citing the 3rd prince's pale complexion, sent him to the physician for medicine. The physician warned the young prince not to tell anyone about the medicine. The 3rd prince immediately understood what kind of medicine it was. He was terrified, but he had no choice. However, after drinking the medicine, nothing happened. The bottle contained only ordinary water. But then his mother suddenly coughed up blood and collapsed. Although she survived, the poison caused her intelligence to regress. So now, the 3rd prince didn't want to fight for the throne. Not only because his life was bought with his mother's sacrifice, but also because in the Empire, the Emperor and Empress were the same person. He couldn't defy the Emperor again, to be with the maid he loved. The cunning Duke Lednain decided to get on good terms with his potential father-in-law. He went to the magic tower alone, hoping to run into Yvonne's father. Not long ago, Yvonne's father had been refused a meeting with the 3rd prince, who claimed to be unwell. Furious at the prince's lack of ambition, he believed the 3rd prince also knew that passive weakness wouldn't maintain the current peace. Just as he was scoffing at the 3rd prince's naivety, he bumped into Duke Ayres, who had been waiting for him. Lednain apologized for being in his way. After the apology was accepted, he deliberately addressed Yvonne's father by his title. "Isn't this the Lord of the Magic Tower?" It's been a while. Yvonne's father didn't recognize the man in front of him, so Lednain introduced himself. "My name is Lednain Ayres." He then bowed politely, to the surprise of Yvonne's father. Flustered, her father complimented Lednain, saying he'd grown into a handsome young man, just like the previous duke. Lednain, in turn, thanked him, adding, "Lord of the Magic Tower, you haven't aged a day since I saw you as a child." But Lednain's charming appearance and eloquent words made Yvonne's father wary. He suddenly regretted arranging a blind date between his precious daughter and such a smooth-talking man. Then, Lednain revealed his purpose. He was looking for beginner-level magic spells in the Magic Tower. This puzzled Yvonne's father. He had heard that Duke Ayres had already achieved extraordinary skill in swordsmanship. Why would he want to learn magic? This was precisely the trap Lednain had set. He mentioned that during his trip to the capital, he had seen many convenient magical tools. While marveling at the magic of mages, he explained that learning magic could also heal injuries and be useful on the battlefield. As the head of the heirs family, responsible for protecting the North, he should be the first to adapt. His words, emphasizing his interest in magic, gradually lowered Yvonne's father's guard. He hadn't expected such foresight from a family obsessed with swordsmanship. Lednain then sincerely thanked Yvonne's father for the magic tower's continuous support of his family. Her father waved his hand dismissively, saying it was his duty. Unconsciously, he had already accepted this humble young man. Next, Duke Ayres began to lavish praise on the maid, saying, "The maid from the Asynthots family is just as outstanding and beautiful as the lord of the magic tower." Hearing his daughter praised by an outsider, Yvonne's father completely let down his guard. He thought Lednain had excellent judgment. However, the next moment, Lednain's eyes sharpened. He brought up the crown prince's abandonment of the maid, calling him a scoundrel for hurting such an excellent young woman. As expected, Yvonne's father immediately agreed, calling the crown prince a scum. He pulled Lednain aside to gossip, bad-mouthing the crown prince's character. He said the crown prince had become arrogant ever since his triumphant return as a war hero. They chatted for a while, and Yvonne's father poured out everything he had kept bottled up inside. He felt incredibly relieved, but he still wasn't satisfied. He invited Duke Ayres to dinner that evening. After bidding each other farewell, Lednain clenched his fists, eagerly anticipating the dinner. Meanwhile, Princess Kaderia was still verbally attacking Yvonne. She demanded that Yvonne answer her questions honestly. Yvonne guessed that if this were the original Yvonne, she would have already exploded. But from her perspective, she was truly an outsider in this situation. So Yvonne calmly asked the princess, "Did you come all this way just to ask such trivial questions, princess? I thought you had something important to discuss since you came to visit so early in the morning." Yvonne's composed response caught Kaderia off guard. The princess couldn't help but see the maid as a dangerous opponent. Still, Kaderia made one last attempt. She rose, agitated, and demanded, "Do you really expect me to believe your actions are without motive? You're a vicious woman who'll stop at nothing to get the crown prince. And it's not just him. Even Duke Ayres will be humiliated by your behavior. If you don't want to further damage your reputation, you'd better take care of this mess." Kaderia's deliberate provocation was meant to enrage Yvonne. She wanted the maid to lash out, to destroy everything she found repulsive, just like she used to. That way, Kaderia could arrest her for the attempted assassination of the crown prince's lover, the Malay kingdom princess. Just then, Yvonne reached out her hand towards the princess. Kaderia thought she'd taken a bait, but Yvonne merely picked up a pastry with her fork. As she ate, she replied, "I'm surprised such rumors are circulating. It's unfortunate, but it doesn't seem to have anything to do with me. Besides," she continued, "His Highness the Crown Prince has a lovely lover now. Regardless of what I do, he shouldn't be paying attention to me. If there really is a problem, you should discuss it with the Crown Prince yourself. Don't tire me out with matters that don't concern me." Kaderia flushed crimson and was about to yell at Yvonne when Baden entered the room. "Enough, Kaderia," he warned. "If I hear you insult my sister again, I won't let it go." Kaderia glared at Baden. He hadn't acknowledged Yvonne as his sister not long ago, yet now he was acting the part of the protective brother. Realizing it was time to retreat, Kaderia apologized to Yvonne, claiming she hadn't controlled her emotions and had said things she shouldn't have. Then, she presented Yvonne with a small, ornate box. "I received this from His Highness the Crown Prince," she explained. Baden impatiently demanded clarification. Kaderia's eyes welled with tears. "This gift was actually meant for Yvonne," she sobbed. "I only found out when I read the letter that came with it. I don't intend to make up for my behavior today with this gift." She continued, "I just want Yvonne to know I don't bear any ill will." With that, Kaderia departed. Once they were sure Kaderia was gone, Baden turned to Yvonne, incredulous. "You let her leave unscathed?" Yvonne chuckled. She'd known Baden had been eavesdropping. If she'd done anything drastic, she knew her brother wouldn't have been able to handle it. Despite her words, Yvonne was grateful for Baden's intervention. Kaderia's words had infuriated her. If she were the original Yvonne, the princess probably wouldn't be able to get out of bed for the rest of her life. Baden suggested throwing the gift away, but Yvonne refused. She was intensely curious about its contents. What could have possibly driven Kaderia to such lengths? Meanwhile, Lednain had been invited to dinner by Yvonne's father. Eager to see the woman he loved, he arrived at the mansion well before nightfall, clutching a bouquet of flowers. As he anticipated seeing Yvonne, A window upstairs suddenly opened, revealing Yvonne. Before Lednain could react, she tossed something down at him, what appeared to be an earring. The next instant, as Lednain stared in astonishment, the earring exploded in a shower of sparks. Earlier, Kadiria had retreated from Yvonne's home, seemingly defeated. However, she had secretly dispatched her familiar to locate the bracelet. To avoid suspicion, she hadn't ordered its immediate destruction, instructing her familiar to watch for an opportune moment. With the bracelet situation handled, Yvonne remained Kadiria's only obstacle. Though rumors of the Mage's transformation had reached her, both she and the Crown Prince refused to believe someone could change so easily. However, after today's encounter, Kadiria had to admit that Yvonne wasn't the same vicious woman she once knew. Even the lie about the gift being from the Crown Prince hadn't fazed her. The gift Kadiria had offered was a specially formulated bath oil designed to win the favor of foolish nobles. It made the skin glow, earning it the nickname Sun's Spring Water. However, frequent use would induce a disfiguring skin disease, allowing Kadiria to swoop in as a savior, offering the cure free of charge and earning the noble's praise. She'd planned to use the same tactic on Yvonne, but the maid's composure made her uncertain whether she would even use the bath oil. Just as Kadiria was racking her brain, her familiar asked if the target had refused to cooperate. As Kadiria prepared to leave, the familiar had observed Yvonne and detected a strong aura of dark magic surrounding her. It assumed Kadiria was trying to recruit her. Kadiria's eyes widened in realization. So, Yvonne was a dark mage too. That explained how she'd so easily seen through her plans. The princess quickly devised a plan to deal with Yvonne. She would report the incident to the royal family. In her quest to become the crown princess, she wouldn't show mercy, even if Yvonne was one of her kind. Meanwhile, Yvonne opened the gift Kadiria had left. Inside, she found a letter penned in what appeared to be the crown prince's handwriting, but which she recognized as a forgery by the princess. Reading the note, Yvonne felt a surge of inexplicable anger towards the philandering prince. She almost understood why Kadiria had confronted her. She was about to discard the seemingly expensive bath oil when her maid entered, informing her that the cosmetic shop had agreed to process the radia grass. Now, all they needed to decide was what kind of product to create. Yvonne's gaze fell upon the bath oil in her hand. She'd heard it was incredibly popular among the nobility, and with summer approaching, the demand for bath oils would only increase. It was the perfect opportunity to corner the market. Yvonne immediately decided they would produce bath oil. It was then that the maid noticed the bath oil in Yvonne's hand. "Milady," she exclaimed, "isn't that Sun's spring water? It's rumored to make skin as smooth as silk. It's a treasure, and even with money, it's hard to come by these days." Yvonne's eyes lit up. "How much is it worth?" she asked. The maid thought for a moment. "Probably 10 million gold coins a bottle now," she guessed. Learning that the bath oil was more precious than gold, Yvonne immediately abandoned the idea of throwing it away. She carefully placed it back in its box, thinking she'd find an opportunity to sell it. The maid then asked if it was a gift from Duke Ayres. Yvonne paused, the image of applying hand cream to the Duke at the cosmetics shop flashing through her mind. Thinking about her actions with the Duke, it did seem like they were on a date. Yvonne blushed crimson. Still, she insisted there was nothing between them. The maid clearly didn't believe her. "If it were me," she gushed, "I'd be sending gifts every day. There's no reason for him not to be smitten with someone as perfect as you, milady." Yvonne basked in the maid's flattery, but her attention was suddenly drawn to the maid's earrings, which suddenly flashed a brilliant red. Without a second thought, Yvonne reached out, snatched the glowing earring, and sprinted towards the window. As she threw the earring, Yvonne calculated that no one should be in the courtyard at that time. However, she'd overlooked one crucial variable. As the earring hurtled towards Duke Lednain, Yvonne's mind went blank. She had no idea what to do. The violent explosion reverberated through the mansion. The poor man had simply come to his beloved's home for dinner, only to be greeted with an exploding earring. Yvonne coughed, choking on the thick smoke. She suddenly remembered the Duke had been downstairs when she'd thrown the earring. Panicked, she rushed to the window and called out his name. To her relief, she saw him standing there, unharmed, his sword still in his hand. It seemed he'd used his swordsmanship to deflect the blast. Yvonne was grateful he wasn't hurt, but then she saw him staring intently at her. She remembered he was a royal secret investigator. Perhaps him being unharmed was the biggest problem of all. She stumbled back, wondering if he'd forgive her if she claimed it was an accident. "Milady," Are you all right? The maid's voice startled her. Yvonne rushed over to check on her, then told her to rest. She explained that she needed to go assess the situation, as Duke Lednane had been caught in the explosion. The maid's eyes widened with worry, but Yvonne reassured her. I was the one who threw it, she admitted. I'll be back soon. Don't worry. But as soon as Yvonne closed the door, she sprinted towards the courtyard, chanting, "What do I do?" over and over in her head. Usually, her minor mishaps were easily forgiven, but this time, she'd set off an explosion in front of a royal investigator. As she descended the stairs, she found the doorway surrounded by a throng of onlookers. Yvonne's legs gave way. This was a disaster. When she finally reached the courtyard, everyone parted to make way for their young mistress. They were surprised to see Yvonne, who usually showed little interest in household affairs, appear at the scene. Taking advantage of the moment, Yvonne surveyed the courtyard. To her relief, the damage wasn't as extensive as she'd feared, but her relief was short-lived. The blonde-haired guard rushed forward to explain that the explosion had coincided with Duke Lednane's visit. Thanks to the Duke absorbing the energy from the blast, the damage had been minimized. He assured Yvonne that he would bring the perpetrator to justice. Unaware that he was speaking to the culprit, Yvonne pushed past him, her unexpected strength sending him reeling. Duke Lednane, surrounded by the crowd, noticed Yvonne approaching. He greeted her warmly, holding a slightly wilted bouquet of flowers. Yvonne hadn't expected him to address her directly. She hadn't yet formulated an excuse. Suddenly, a cold sweat broke out. Fueled by her guilt, she imagined the Duke giving her a strange, unsettling smile. The onlookers, witnessing the scene, murmured about how well-suited the maid and the Duke were. Yvonne thought, he's glaring at me, not smiling. How are we well-suited? Flustered, she asked if he was injured. I'm fine, he replied, but I wasn't expecting that. I accidentally set off the rose fireworks I was going to give you. Yvonne was taken aback. Why would he give me flowers? She wondered. Perhaps it was the Duke's habit never to arrive empty-handed. As his prospective fiancée, accepting them seemed like the polite thing to do. So, she took the flowers from the Duke. If you say these are for me, she said, then I'll accept them. They'll be perfect for decorating my room. Hearing Yvonne mention decorating her room, the Duke immediately offered to buy more flowers. Yvonne quickly declined. She inquired about the reason for his visit. Upon learning he'd been invited for dinner by her father, and glancing at the high sun in the sky, Yvonne was dumbfounded. She could only manage a week. You're rather early, Your Grace. Just then, the captain of the guard approached them and bowed. He asked Yvonne if she had any clues about the explosion that had just occurred. He'd already questioned Duke Lednane, but the Duke claimed to know nothing, and there was no solid evidence at the scene. Yvonne was astonished that the Duke hadn't exposed her. He simply shrugged, then adopted an expression that seemed to be fishing for praise. Unfortunately, Yvonne was completely oblivious to his meaning. The Duke then instructed the captain to investigate other leads. He then asked Yvonne to lead him to the reception room. Yvonne panicked, assuming he intended to blackmail her. Though grateful that he hadn't exposed her as a troublemaker in front of everyone, she was still apprehensive about what would happen next. She led him to her private reception room, thinking it best to deal with whatever came next in private. Unexpectedly, the Duke walked straight to the window, remarking on the force of the explosion and inquiring if Yvonne had been injured. It was then that Yvonne remembered she'd been standing at the window during the blast, yet remained completely unharmed. Yvonne assured him she was fine and thanked him for covering for her. She confessed that the explosion was her fault, a complete accident, and apologized profusely. The Duke murmured, "An accident." Assuming he didn't believe her, Yvonne elaborated, explaining that one of her artifacts had malfunctioned, and in a moment of panic, she'd thrown it outside. Unfortunately, the Duke had happened to be passing by at that exact moment. So, you're saying you realized the bomb you made was about to explode, so you threw it outside. Then why didn't you use a defensive spell? At his words, Yvonne's heart skipped a beat. He's sharp, as expected of a royal investigator. He's found my weakness. Yvonne was completely trapped, unsure what to do. The Duke slowly advanced towards her. Just as she was about to confess her inability to use magic, the Duke asked, "Did you throw that bomb at me on purpose?" The love-struck Duke, in his first attempt at courting a woman, had been bombed. Yet, he wasn't angry at all. Instead, he interpreted it as a test from Yvonne. Meanwhile, Yvonne was terrified at the thought of having attacked a royal investigator. She desperately wanted to confess her magical amnesia, but that would expose her vulnerability, and the enemies she'd made in her past life would surely come after her. Saying nothing would be tantamount to admitting she'd intentionally harmed the Duke. Then, perhaps, Her father and brother would once again distance themselves from her, believing her true nature had been revealed. Yvonne was caught in a dilemma. After careful consideration, she decided to confess her condition. However, before she could speak, the Duke, seeing her troubled expression, offered his own interpretation. "You must be testing me." Yvonne was utterly bewildered, wondering if the explosion had addled the Duke's mind. It turned out that after realizing his feelings for Yvonne were more than mere curiosity, the Duke had resolved to be the most exceptional fish in her pond. Having never left his territory, he knew little of Yvonne's past. To compensate for the time they hadn't spent together, he'd begun frantically gathering information about her. The more he learned, however, the more he sensed that beneath Yvonne's unconventional behavior lay a passionate love for the Crown Prince. But the Duke believed with all his heart that the Crown Prince was no match for him. He simply lacked the opportunity to prove himself to Yvonne. Therefore, when he saw the red light emanating from the earring, he felt no fear, only exhilaration and a touch of anxiety. He saw it as a test from Yvonne. After all, the Crown Prince, like himself, was a master swordsman. And since the Crown Prince had once shielded Kaderia from one of Yvonne's bombs, he, as Yvonne's suitor, should be capable of the same feat. So, the Duke reassured Yvonne that he wouldn't blame her, regardless of her reasons. Seeing the Duke's almost masochistic demeanor, Yvonne invited him to sit and talk, hoping to clear up the misunderstanding. She then asked him what he meant by test. The Duke calmly swirled his wine glass, glancing at the sword at his side. "Weren't you trying to confirm my strength, milady?" he asked, then smiled. "I assume I passed." Yvonne nervously looked at the Duke's sword, desperately trying to understand what he meant by passed. Perhaps the Duke was referring to the incident where she'd thrown the bomb at Kaderia, and the Crown Prince had protected her. But what did that have to do with the test? Suddenly, it dawned on Yvonne. The Duke might have guessed that she knew his true identity as a royal investigator. He must have misinterpreted her actions, thinking she was deliberately recreating the same scenario to test whether he was indeed the Crown Prince's secret investigator. The Duke's composure was, in reality, a silent form of pressure, meant to tell Yvonne she couldn't escape his surveillance. Yvonne's face paled. With utmost sincerity, she apologized to the Duke. "I was indeed testing you, Your Grace," she admitted, "but now I truly regret it. I beg your forgiveness." She pleaded with him not to tell her sister about the incident. The Duke's expression darkened. "Who are you referring to?" he asked, his voice low. When he heard the name Crown Prince, the Duke set down his wine glass. "I don't understand," he said, his brow furrowed. "Why would you mention the Crown Prince here?" Yvonne instinctively assumed it was a royal investigator's duty to report to the Crown Prince. Her testing and subsequent request had been far too presumptuous. Flustered, she apologized again, urging him to disregard her earlier words. The Duke rose from his seat and then, with a soft thud, sat down beside Yvonne. He solemnly promised not to tell anyone about the incident and handed something to Yvonne. Astonished, Yvonne accepted the object. It was the earring bomb she'd lost earlier. She couldn't believe the Duke, for her sake, was willing to disregard his duty as a royal investigator. "Why?" she asked, bewildered. "It pained me to see you so distressed, milady," the Duke replied simply. "Besides, this is a matter between the two of us. There's no need to involve anyone else." A blush crept up Yvonne's neck. She couldn't quite decipher whether the Duke's actions stemmed from simple kindness and tolerance, or if he genuinely believed her fabricated story. The Duke then announced his intention to deal with the captain of the guard. He pulled out his communication device and crushed it in his hand. He would tell the captain that the explosion had been caused by a malfunctioning device of his own. Yvonne was puzzled. Hadn't he just told the captain he knew nothing? Duke Lednain, with an air of confidence, reassured her. "Don't worry, milady. While I may be Lednain in your presence," he said with a wink to the rest of the world, "I am the head of the Lednain family." Watching the Duke fabricate a lie for her, Yvonne's heart pounded in her chest. It seemed he truly was treating her differently. But then, the Duke leaned in close, his voice soft. "Milady," he murmured, "would you grant me a small request?" The love-struck Duke, willing to take the blame for Yvonne's mistake, waited with bated breath for her answer. Not long before, Baden had learned of the terrifying bomb attack at his family's mansion. He immediately questioned the captain of the guard about the incident. According to the captain's trembling account, the explosion had been caused by a malfunctioning magical device belonging to Duke Lednain. Relieved, Baden inquired about the Duke's safety and whereabouts. He failed to notice the captain's continued trembling as he reported that the Duke was currently strolling through the small woods with Miss Yvonne. Baden's composure chatterait. He couldn't bear the thought of his sister being swept away by romance again. He'd explicitly warned her to stay away from the Duke, and their father had even invited him for dinner. They were all ignoring his warnings. Meanwhile, the Duke was busy taking credit for his actions, informing Yvonne that he'd ordered the captain to cease the investigation. Grateful, Yvonne promised to grant him any request. The Duke paused, a blush rising on his cheeks as he tilted his head and looked at Yvonne, making her feel slightly self-conscious. If he's going to ask me for money, she thought, I don't have any. But the Duke wouldn't waste this precious opportunity on such a trivial matter. Gently tucking a strand of hair behind Yvonne's ear, he murmured, I was hoping, milady, that you might call me Led. It was his nickname, a sign of intimacy. He hoped their future interactions wouldn't be so formal. Yvonne, flustered by the Duke's casual touch, found herself increasingly bewildered by him. However, confident in her reputation as a villainess and her perceived unattractiveness, she dismissed the gesture as anything more than friendly. She agreed to his request and, without hesitation, called him Led. The unexpected use of his nickname stunned the Duke. He hadn't realized the sheer power of hearing it from the woman he adored. As he savored the sweet moment, a shout from the distance broke the spell. Baden was running towards them, breathless. He would have collapsed had Yvonne not been there to support him. As soon as he caught his breath, Baden demanded that Yvonne leave so he could speak with Duke Lednain privately. Yvonne, fearing a confrontation, hesitated. To her surprise, the Duke also agreed to a private conversation. Resigned, Yvonne returned to the mansion. Once she was gone, Baden sternly warned the Duke to stay away from his sister. The Duke listened calmly, then offered his signature charming smile. I understand your concern, young master, he said smoothly. I assure you, I would never intentionally harm Miss Yvonne. Baden found himself momentarily captivated by the Duke's charisma. His words seemed so sincere, so convincing. Before he could react, the Duke leaned in close. The Duke clasped Baden's shoulder firmly. I hear, young master, that your knowledge of magical theory is quite profound, and that you're quite adept at teaching. It dawned on Baden then. The Duke, in his pursuit of Yvonne, had thoroughly researched both him and their father. He knew exactly how to win them over. Later, at the dinner banquet, Duke Lednain and Baden's father conversed with an almost unnatural rapport. Duke Ayres and Baden's father seemed utterly charmed, leaving Yvonne to wonder what sort of spell the Duke had cast over them. As the Duke held court at the dinner table, Yvonne felt a universe of difference separate her from their jovial camaraderie. Then, a ripple of hushed whispers reached her ears. The maids outside the dining room were gossiping about the Duke, saying he looked like a son-in-law come to propose. Yvonne found the notion absurd. If she were truly his intended, surely he'd be paying attention to her, not just chatting and drinking with her brother and father. A pang of unexpected sadness tugged at her heart. She recalled the moment she'd entered the dining room, freshly changed into her evening gown. Duke Lednain had risen from his seat and complimented her attire. But after that, he'd barely spoken to her. He'd asked her to call him Led just a short while ago, yet now. Her brother and father were already quite drunk. Though Yvonne knew they'd only had half a glass each, she couldn't bear to listen to their drunken ramblings any longer, so she excused herself. Leaving the dining room, Yvonne sought refuge in the quiet solitude of the courtyard. Unsure of her own feelings, she was startled when a figure appeared behind her. Turning nervously, she recognized the young maid who was close friends with her own personal maid. Yvonne inquired as to the reason for her presence. The maid curtsied deeply, claiming she had a request for Yvonne. Seeing the maid trembling, Yvonne realized she was terrified yet determined. The maid knelt, begging Yvonne to sell her the son's spring water. Her sister, she explained, suffered from a severe skin ailment, and only the son's spring water could cure it. She'd heard Yvonne had received a bottle recently. If Yvonne didn't need it, the maid pleaded would she please sell it to her. She would spend her entire life repaying the debt. Yvonne was taken aback. She hadn't realized the son's spring water had such potent healing properties. How could her own products compete with that? She told the maid she wouldn't sell the son's spring water. The maid, realizing her request was presumptuous, apologized profusely. But Yvonne's next words offered a glimmer of hope. Gently wiping away the maid's tears, she said, "I'm very interested in your sister's story. Bring her to me." The love-struck Duke was in for a rude awakening. Ingi, Baden's younger brother, had overheard Baden's drunken confession that Yvonne planned to grind the Duke's courtship gift into powder and drink it. The Duke spiraled into self-doubt. He'd only wanted to be the most special fish in Yvonne's pond, but now it seemed he was just bait. Meanwhile, Yvonne, having learned of the sun's spring water's healing properties, felt a surge of unease. Her own rhodia grass cosmetics boasted similar benefits, but she couldn't recall any mention of such potent healing cosmetics in the original story. She asked the maid to bring her ailing sister to the mansion. The maid, apprehensive, asked Yvonne her purpose. Yvonne, in turn, inquired about the maid's surname. "Roni," she asked, "is it a noble family? I heard that 10 years ago, 2 daughters of the Roni family were cast out, and a distant cousin inherited the family fortune. Is that about you and your sister?" The maid, her face clouding with painful memories, admitted that she and her sister were indeed the direct descendants of the Roni family, now living in the outskirts with their mother. "Your sister," Yvonne continued, "having received the heir's education of the Roni family, must be quite intelligent. I have a task for her, and I'll compensate her handsomely. If you agree to these terms, I'll provide you with the sun's spring water." The maid looked up at Yvonne, her eyes wide with surprise and hope. She hadn't expected such generosity. Yvonne extended a hand to help her up. "We'll discuss the specifics with your sister." The maid grasped Yvonne's hand like a lifeline, her voice firm. "Yes, milady. We'll come find you tomorrow morning." Back at the dinner party, the evening was drawing to a close. Yvonne's father, thoroughly inebriated, was carried away by servants. Baden told the Duke he would consider his proposal. Earlier, in the woods, the Duke had asked Baden to be his magic tutor, on the condition that Yvonne wouldn't be harmed. The Duke, bewildered, had asked Baden if he truly seemed like someone capable of harming Yvonne. Of course not. To anyone, the Duke was handsome, charming, and the epitome of a gentleman. He lived up to his reputation as the most handsome man in the Empire. But that, Baden explained, was precisely the problem. As the Duke stared at him in surprise, Baden began to explain Yvonne's infatuation with the Crown Prince. The two had barely interacted, but the Crown Prince, after bumping into Yvonne, had apologized with a bright, sunny smile. That was all it took. Yvonne, Baden explained, was simply far too trusting. Baden advised the Duke, if she's not the type to fall easily in love, don't give Yvonne any false hope. Then, he added, almost as an afterthought, Yvonne likely has no romantic feelings for you. Because, he continued, lowering his voice conspiratorially, I overheard her saying she plans to grind your courtship gift into powder and drink it. The Duke felt a sharp pang of rejection. His heart shattered into a million pieces. Oblivious to the Duke's devastation, Baden, still slightly drunk, asked, was your gift by any chance that she who long Jing tea? The Duke remained silent, drowning his sorrows in glass after glass of red wine. He emptied bottle after bottle, the attending servant hovering nervously, constantly refilling his glass. After the banquet, the Duke wandered into the courtyard, hoping the fresh air would sober him up. But as he walked, his eyes began to well with tears. He couldn't understand. Yvonne had said she loved the bracelet he'd given her. So why would she want to grind it into powder? He sank to the ground, utterly dejected. Had she only called him lead because he'd asked her to? Had he inadvertently pressured her? The scent of Yvonne's hand cream, a gift she'd given him earlier, wafted through the air, intensifying his despair. It all felt like a cruel joke, a one-sided infatuation. Yvonne had always seemed so cautious around him. Perhaps she felt burdened by his attention, and her apparent affection was merely a polite facade. He'd only wanted to be a fish in her pond, not a burden. The next morning, the Duke dragged his adjutant out for an early training session. When he mentioned his intention to learn magic, his adjutant looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. Using magic, the adjutant protested, goes against the Ayers family's long-held tradition of swordsmanship. But the Duke was resolute. I am the head of the Ayers family now, he declared. Traditions must evolve with the times. Seeing his adjutant's continued skepticism, the Duke suddenly lunged forward with a wooden training sword. The adjutant barely parried the blow. The Duke leaped back, and a flash of white light grazed the adjutant's neck. He froze, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. The Duke grinned. That, he explained, is the power of magic. I can only control it in my hands for now, but imagine the possibilities if I could wield it more freely. The adjutant, however, saw right through him. You're just looking for an excuse to spend more time with the maid, he said dryly. You've never been interested in any of the beautiful women you've met before. This sudden change of heart makes me suspect you've fallen under some sort of enchantment. The word enchantment stung. Are you suggesting, the Duke retorted, that I can't tell the difference between genuine feelings and magically induced ones? The adjutant backpedaled frantically. It's just that there are rumors, he stammered, that the maid is using you to make the crown prince jealous. He continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. They say she's been seen out late at night. Not like that time. She went for a walk at 2 a.m. and ran into a drunk, handsome man who invited her to sleep with him. So, not long ago, the Duke's desire to learn magic as a way to get closer to Yvonne had been interpreted by his adjutant as being under Yvonne's spell. This was fueled by rumors that Yvonne was using the Duke to win back the Crown Prince's affections. This made the Duke recall the previous night at Yvonne's family home. Yvonne had been strolling in the courtyard, assuming the dinner party had ended, and was heading back to her room. On her way, she stumbled upon the drunken Duke sitting by the path. Startled, Yvonne initially mistook him for a monster sent by the dark mages to attack her. It wasn't until the Duke looked up that she recognized him and softly called out, "Led." The Duke, however, fixed her with a strange, intense stare, confusing her. He then mumbled a correction. It's lead, turning Yvonne into a metaphorical sputtering steam engine. She hadn't realized the Duke could be so endearing when drunk. Leaning down, she asked what he was doing there. The Duke simply stood up and gazed at her silently. Yvonne, in turn, studied him, noticing the flush in his cheeks. It was a stark contrast to his usual composed demeanor, making her want to reach out and pinch his face. Then, the Duke asked the question that had been plaguing him all night. Did you really like the courtship gift I gave you? Yvonne looked at him, puzzled. He clarified, his voice laced with hurt, because you said you were going to grind it into powder and drink it. Yvonne inwardly cursed her brother's loose lips. I did say that, she admitted, but it was a misunderstanding. The Duke's expression darkened. Seeing his obvious distress, Yvonne quickly added, I really do like the gift. I only said that because. She trailed off, searching for a plausible explanation. As she scrambled for an excuse, she caught sight of the Duke's wounded expression. A pang of guilt shot through her. The Duke had always been kind and unbiased towards her, and here she was causing him such pain. She resolved to tell him her secret. Just then, the Duke straightened up, his composure returning. Someone's watching us, he murmured, his gaze fixed on a nearby window. Yvonne followed his gaze and realized it was Baden's room. Assuming her brother was spying on them, disapproving of their interaction, she reassured the Duke, don't worry about it. But the Duke's eyes flashed with anger. He told Yvonne that the gaze emanating from the window felt unsettling, and he insisted on investigating it himself. Yvonne, however, didn't want things to become awkward between the Duke and her brother. Instinctively, she grabbed the Duke's hand and pushed him against the wall. With a decisive thwack, she had him cornered, preventing his escape. Her face etched with concern, Yvonne urged the Duke to calm down, assuring him she would send a guard to investigate. The Duke, completely taken aback by this sudden maneuver, blinked in surprise. He tentatively reached out, as if to embrace Yvonne, but ultimately refrained, simply murmuring, I understand. A smile bloomed on Yvonne's face. She found the Duke particularly endearing tonight. He was clearly stubborn, yet surprisingly obedient. It was then that Yvonne realized she was still holding the Duke's wrist. Mortified, she quickly released him, apologizing profusely for her rudeness. The Duke, however, seemed mesmerized by the reddened mark on his wrist. A master swordsman, he had been completely overpowered by Yvonne. The thought filled him with a strange sense of adoration. His beloved was truly remarkable. Meanwhile, Yvonne anxiously asked if he was angry. She needn't have worried. The Duke, far from being upset, actually chuckled and asked her to do it again. Then, he inquired about what she had been about to tell him earlier. Yvonne declared a top secret, something he absolutely couldn't tell anyone. Upon hearing this, The Duke immediately leaned in conspiratorially, whispering that if it was such an important secret, they shouldn't discuss it there, and besides, she didn't have to tell him at all. He was oblivious to the effect his unexpected closeness was having on Yvonne, causing her blood to rush to her head. Flustered, she stiffly asked him what he planned to do next. Perhaps they could have some tea or admire the moon. Realizing that it was too late for either activity, Yvonne blurted out an invitation for the Duke to stay the night, or go out and sunbathe at midnight. She added, her thoughts jumbled. She mentally berated herself, going out for a midnight stroll, finding a handsome, drunk man, and then inviting him to sleep over. But the Duke was staring intently at Baden's room, a strange look on his face. He sensed a hostile presence emanating from within. Moments later, the Crown Prince's familiar emerged from Baden's nightstand. It was the source of the unsettling gaze. Ordinarily, it would be invisible to humans. The familiar, realizing the Duke's unusual ability, felt a surge of unease. It decided it needed to destroy the bracelet as soon as possible before things got out of hand. But just as it was about to act, the door suddenly opened. The Duke, on his way back with Yvonne to retire for the night, had discovered Baden passed out in the hallway. He helped Baden to bed. As the Duke was about to call for a servant to prepare a bath, Baden pointed towards the bracelet and asked him to repair it. Hidden under the bed, the familiar could only watch helplessly as the Duke took the bracelet. Remembering the Crown Prince's orders, the familiar reluctantly followed the Duke, hoping for another opportunity to destroy the bracelet. However, Yvonne was waiting for the Duke, ready to escort him to the guest room. The familiar seethed. Why wouldn't this annoying maid disappear? Suddenly, a wave of icy fear washed over it. The Duke, as if he could see it, stared coldly in its direction. Then, he followed Yvonne to the guest room. The familiar, its courage completely gone, retreated. Back in the guest room, Yvonne brought the Duke a glass of water, but found him already asleep on the bed. Assuming he was deeply slumbering, she placed the water on the bedside table. Then, she tiptoed back to the bed to observe him. He certainly looked exhausted, but as she watched, Yvonne found herself developing inappropriate thoughts. His eyelashes were long, his forehead smooth, his nose perfectly shaped, and his lips incredibly alluring. Her gaze fixed on his lips, Yvonne leaned down, her face inches from his. Caught in the moment, she felt an overwhelming urge to taste him. But just then, her long hair cascaded down, nearly brushing against the Duke's face. Startled, she straightened up, frantically patting her head to regain her composure. As she turned to leave, the Duke's hand shot out, catching hers. "Where are you going?" he asked. "You said you had something to tell me." Yvonne's hand remained firmly in his grasp. Blushing furiously, she desperately wanted to escape. She had no idea when he had woken up. Urging him to get some rest, she tried to pull away. But the Duke simply said he wasn't tired and had been waiting for her, his expression unwavering. The thought that he had witnessed her embarrassing behavior mortified Yvonne. She briefly considered silencing him permanently. Pushing him back onto the bed, she insisted, "You must have been very tired and fallen asleep just now, right?" The Duke, however, maintained that he wasn't tired at all. Resigned, Yvonne decided to tell him quickly and then make her escape. "The reason I said I would grind the bracelet into powder and drink it," she began, "wasn't because I disliked it. I need a lot of magic stones," she confessed. "I know it was rude to say I'd grind your gift into powder. I'm truly sorry." The Duke's face softened into a warm smile. "If you need them," he said gently, "I'll give you even more magic stones from now on." Seeing that the Duke truly wasn't angry, Yvonne smiled and told him she would do her best to find the magic stones herself. She then urged him to get some rest. After Yvonne left, the Duke covered his mouth, a look of disbelief on his face. The memory of Yvonne leaning in close made him feel as if he had a 104-degree fever. He was burning up. He couldn't help but wonder if he truly had been affected by the maid's hidden magic. The next morning, the maid came as usual to wake Yvonne. Noticing the maid's missing earrings, Yvonne realized yesterday's events hadn't been a dream. She asked the maid if her ears were all right. The maid smiled and replied that they were almost completely healed. Yvonne then inquired about the Duke, only to be told that he had left in the early hours of the morning. Yvonne felt a pang of disappointment, but she quickly shook her head, telling herself not to overthink things. Her priority now was to investigate the cause of the explosion in the ear room. Yvonne quickly returned to her usual routine, snacking on pastries while reading. She discovered that her original self had meticulously organized all the relevant documents. This meant she could delegate the investigation to someone else. Yvonne couldn't help but feel a sense of melancholy. Her predecessor had been so diligent and meticulous, yet had met such a tragic end. Just then, a wave of nausea washed over Yvonne, accompanied by a disturbing premonition of death and a sense of déjà vu. She calmed herself, inwardly reassuring herself that she wouldn't die so easily. The next moment, the maid informed Yvonne that the two Rodney sisters had arrived. Despite being the most talented daughter of the family, the elder sister was forced to wear a mask every day. She suffered from a rare skin disease that had turned her into a pariah, a figure of disgust. Because of this, her rightful position as head of the family had been usurped by her cousin. Even her mother and younger sister had been expelled from the family. Yet, Yvonne had insisted on hiring the elder sister as her secretary. Upon arriving at the Duke's mansion for the first time, Liana wore thick clothing to conceal her skin. Even so, it couldn't stop the whispers and stares. Her younger sister, Eudora, desperately wanted to take her away from the judging eyes, but a voice stopped them. Eudora's face paled with alarm. Then she heard Baden ask who this person was, as he hadn't been informed of any visitors. Eudora bowed respectfully and introduced her older sister, Liana, explaining that she had come at Yvonne's invitation. Baden frowned. If she was invited by Yvonne, why was she hiding her face? At that moment, Liana stepped forward and bowed, introducing herself. She gently lifted her mask, explaining that she had a skin disease and didn't want to make others uncomfortable. Baden asked if it was contagious. At the word contagious, a fresh wave of unpleasant murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Seeing her sister subjected to such scrutiny, Eudora vehemently declared that the disease wasn't contagious. Just then, the after effects of Baden's hangover from the previous night hit him, causing a wave of nausea. He abruptly dismissed the sisters, telling them he just wanted to make sure and meant no offense. However, to everyone present, it appeared as if he was repulsed by Liana's appearance. Liana reassured her sister, saying she was used to such reactions. But as they walked away, she couldn't help but recall the past. Back in her family home, her cousin had never hesitated to mock her appearance. Despite her best efforts, the position of family head had been taken from her, the justification being that a proper appearance was essential for the role. Since then, she and her mother and sister had been living in the countryside. But deep down, she knew she couldn't accept such a humiliating fate. Her sister's voice suddenly snapped her back to reality. They had arrived at Yvonne's room without her realizing. "Don't just stand there. Come in," Eudora urged. Liana stepped forward and bowed to Yvonne, remembering it was improper to greet someone while masked. Liana removed her mask, revealing her afflicted face. Yvonne couldn't help but gasp. Turning away, she sighed. "This won't do. It's worse than I imagined." The sisters' faces fell, assuming this meant rejection. As Liana reached to replace her mask, Yvonne stopped her. "Quickly, take off those thick clothes," she instructed. Then, she ordered Eudora to fetch the attending physician. After Eudora left, Yvonne produced a contract and explained its terms to Liana. Liana stared at the contract in disbelief. Not only was Yvonne offering her the position of secretary, but she also promised to find a way to treat her skin condition until it was cured. Just then, Eudora returned with the attending physician. The physician had just finished attending to Baden's hangover. Yvonne couldn't help but scoff at her brother's dramatics. He'd only had 2 drinks. Liana slammed the contract on the table. She demanded to know why Yvonne, a lady-in-waiting, was so invested in her, a disinherited noble with no prospects. There was no benefit for Yvonne in this arrangement. Given Yvonne's notorious reputation, Liana assumed there was an ulterior motive. But then, a spark of understanding flickered in her eyes. Yvonne calmly explained, "I simply want to use you, because you received training as the Viscount's heir." After saying this, Yvonne rummaged around nearby, pulling out a bottle of Sun spring water. She told Liana that she wasn't running a charity and that this bottle was meant to be used on her to see its effects. Seeing the lady-in-waiting's complete lack of negotiation skills, Liana admitted that Yvonne indeed needed a secretary skilled in negotiation. However, she pointed out there must be many other candidates available. "So, you're accepting the position, right?" Yvonne interrupted. She immediately pulled out a contract, excitedly urging Liana to sign. Yvonne couldn't believe her luck. With her reputation, she'd managed to snag a secretary of this caliber. Liana, too, felt the position was almost too good to be true, unwilling to let this unexpected opportunity slip away. Yvonne then instructed the physician to examine her newly acquired secretary. During the application of the medicine, Liana trembled with pain, yet remained standing. Even Yvonne watched with apprehension, asking the physician what kind of illness it was. The physician could only say it was an allergy of unknown origin. Liana added that she had tried countless remedies, spending a fortune, but nothing had worked. Yvonne decided to try the sun's spring water. After all, it was touted as a cure for any skin ailment. Due to a rare skin disease, Liana had become a pariah, a figure of disgust. Because of this, her cousin had usurped her position as head of the family, expelling her and her family. Since then, she had been living in a small cottage in the countryside with her mother and sister. Yet now, she had been chosen by the lady-in-waiting to be her secretary. And to treat her skin disease, Yvonne didn't hesitate to use the precious sun's spring water. Soon, Liana was immersed in the bath, enjoying the fragrant water. But then she paused, sniffing the air. She told Yvonne that the scent was very familiar and wondered if the sun's spring water was a counterfeit. Overhearing this, Carol, the maid, picked up the bottle and confirmed its authenticity. She had, after all, recently inquired about it with her aunt's friend's daughter's friend's mother. The intel was highly reliable. Eudora also chimed in, saying the scent was similar to the nutrient solution her sister regularly drank. Yvonne leaned in to smell it herself. At first, the fragrance was indeed rich, but the more she inhaled, the more pungent it became. Shortly after, Yvonne learned from the sisters' conversation that the nutrient solution they mentioned was a gift from a benefactor who had been very kind to their family. It was supposed to effectively relieve itching. Hearing both of them agree on the similarity between the nutrient solution and the sun's spring water, Yvonne fell into deep thought. She then called Carol outside and asked if she knew who Liana's benefactor was. Carol told Yvonne that it was someone from the Cardin family, and that the Rodney family had served the Cardin family for generations. Yvonne felt like she had heard that name before. Suddenly, it hit her. The Empress's name included Cardin. This meant the Cardin family was the Empress's family. Looking towards the distant palace, Yvonne's thoughts drifted. In the Empire, the Empress was a role model for all nobles. She was hailed as the most outstanding diplomat in history. Because the Emperor was perpetually ill, she had long since taken the reins of power. With her exceptional political skills and brilliant intellect, she had rightfully secured her position as the empire's highest leader. Moreover, the Empress was also known for her benevolence towards the common people, often providing relief to the poor. She had even adopted Adrian, a concubine's son, and raised him as her own. Therefore, the entire empire held her in high regard, especially Crown Prince Adrian. At that moment, in the palace courtyard, the Crown Prince suddenly embraced the Empress from behind. The Empress playfully scolded Adrian for acting so childishly despite his age. "It's just us, Mother and I, so it doesn't matter," he replied. As Adrian's birthday was approaching, the Empress didn't stop him. She turned and asked if there was anything he wanted as a gift. The Crown Prince knew that despite her words, his mother had already prepared a gift. The Empress smiled and promised that she would do her best to get him whatever he desired. This profound affection always puzzled Adrian. He wasn't her biological son, nor did he possess any exceptional abilities. Why was she so good to him? The next moment, the Empress leaned down and hugged Adrian's neck. Her heartfelt words eased his anxieties. "You are a gift from heaven," she said. "Your existence brings me immense strength and joy." Meanwhile, Yvonne was still troubled by Liana's skin condition. She found it strange. The Rodney family had served as deputy commanders to the Cardin family for generations. Yet, Liana, the heir, had developed this skin disease before she could assume her position. Furthermore, someone had been providing her with a nutrient solution to alleviate her symptoms, even though she could no longer inherit the family title. And that nutrient solution happened to smell like sun's spring water. Yvonne speculated that perhaps both contained ingredients beneficial to the skin, which explained the similar scent. However, she still felt uneasy. She casually asked Carol what Liana's cousin, the current head of the Rodney family, was like. Carol immediately replied that he was lazy and greedy. Both Yvonne and Carol agreed that the cousin must have somehow caused Liana's skin condition, but how he did it remained a mystery. And why would the Cardin family, led by the Empress, help a fallen noble like Liana? Suddenly, Yvonne thought of a possibility. A sharp pain stabbed through her head, causing Carol to look at her with concern. Yvonne reassured her, saying it was just a slight migraine. Then she began to consider her next course of action. She ordered Carol to find out who exactly had given Liana the nutrient solution. Seeing Carol frozen in place, Yvonne felt a pang of embarrassment, thinking her request might have been too much of an imposition. However, Carol puffed out her chest and explained that she was just surprised to receive such a request from the lady-in-waiting for the first time. As the niece of the intelligence guild Zhuizhong, president/leader, she would do her utmost to complete the task. Yvonne was dumbfounded. No wonder this girl could answer any question she posed. The maid who served by her side daily was actually the niece of the intelligence guild's president. Yvonne's jaw dropped at this revelation. When Carol first started as a maid, she was so clumsy and always clung to Yvonne like a puppy. Yvonne never would have imagined she had such a background. Not long ago, Yvonne's newly hired secretary had been afflicted with a severe skin disease. Yet, the nutrient solution Liana had been taking for so long smelled remarkably similar to Sun's spring water. This led Yvonne to suspect there must be some connection. So, she decided to have Carol investigate the matter. Carol accepted the order, but then realized that if she left, there would be no one to attend to the lady-in-waiting. Yvonne scratched her head awkwardly, remembering that Carol had always been her only personal maid. At this point, Carol recommended Eudora as Yvonne's second maid, praising her pleasant personality. Moreover, Eudora and Liana were close sisters. They could be given a large room to share. Yvonne snapped her fingers, accepting Carol's suggestion. Carol, satisfied, accepted the new task. Soon after, Eudora was summoned by Yvonne. Liana, freshly bathed, accompanied her. Although the marks of her skin disease were still visible, her elegant figure was undeniable in her fresh clothes. Even Yvonne couldn't help but be impressed. However, Liana seemed quite uneasy. She cautiously asked if her appearance would disgust others. As soon as she spoke, both Yvonne and the head maid looked at her. Yvonne immediately made a promise. No one speaks like that in this house. You are my secretary and deserve to be treated with respect. Liana cautiously approached. The large red patches on her skin made her steps particularly careful. Finally, she stopped in front of Yvonne and sincerely thanked her for her acceptance and kindness. Yvonne then introduced the head maid and Liana. After they exchanged bows, Yvonne told Eudora that she would be her personal maid from that day forward. The head maid didn't object, mentioning that there were enough people working in the kitchen and they could spare one. Thus, Yvonne successfully brought both sisters into her household. The two sisters exchanged glances. Eudora was so overjoyed, she almost squealed, while Liana felt a sense of relief. With the formal handover complete between Yvonne and the head maid, Yvonne now had 3 key people in her camp, which gave her a sense of security. Although she couldn't yet confide her secrets to them, she was content to have people on her side. In her previous life, Yvonne had been an orphan, which had shaped her into a person who was both insecure and fiercely independent. She wasn't good at communicating with others, nor did she ask for help. When she was young, if someone spoke ill of her, she would fight them relentlessly. As an adult, when her colleagues isolated her and deliberately pushed all the work onto her, Yvonne suddenly felt that the Duke was quite similar to her. If he didn't have such a strong sense of pride, perhaps his fate wouldn't have been so tragic. However, the next moment, Yvonne felt another wave of dizziness. She sighed, hoping she wasn't developing some strange illness. The head maid then took Eudora to familiarize herself with her duties. Yvonne, in turn, prepared to test Liana's work abilities. Soon, the two of them arrived at the study. The table was piled high with documents. Yvonne glanced at Liana's resume and saw that she knew several languages and had studied law, administration, geography, and diplomacy. With this in mind, she selected some simple tasks for Liana. The documents mainly consisted of statistics on the types and numbers of magical creatures that had appeared in various regions over the past century. Among them were records of creatures that had brought calamities upon humanity. Liana's task was to mark the information about the magical creatures on a map, indicating their respective regions. Although it sounded simple, it required geographical knowledge. Liana simply smiled faintly. She was happy to be of use. Only when she was focused on work did she not feel the presence of her skin disease. Liana spoke lightly, but Yvonne felt a pang of sympathy for her. Years of hard work and knowledge had been reduced to nothing because of her skin disease. Yvonne then excused herself, telling Liana to report to her after completing the task. Liana worked diligently, meticulously transferring the information from the documents onto the map. This simple task, in her eyes, was the first step toward a new new life. Two siblings, inseparable in childhood, had grown into bitter enemies. Due to last night's hangover, the older brother slept restlessly. He dreamed of his childhood. He used to dote on Yvonne. Back then, Yvonne couldn't even walk. He would let her stand on his feet, teaching her to walk step by step. And Yvonne was very attached to her brother. No matter what he was doing, she would always find a way to be by his side. Seeing little Yvonne struggling to climb onto the sofa, her brother would give her a gentle push from behind. Then, he would affectionately ruffle Yvonne's small head, praising her for being so clever. However, their close relationship fractured when Yvonne displayed an extraordinary talent. One day, her brother tried to teach her magic, just like he had taught her to walk. But Yvonne merely glanced at him and then effortlessly performed the same magic with far greater effect. Her brother was dumbfounded. He was considered one of the top talents at the academy. Yet he was now surpassed by his younger sister, who hadn't even attended school. And Yvonne's talent wasn't limited to magic. She also excelled at running, horseback riding, and various other physical skills. From then on, the title of genius fell upon Yvonne. No one cared about her brother, who was inferior to her in every aspect. Innocent little Yvonne, seeing her brother, hurried over to greet him. However, her brother coldly turned away, hurting little Yvonne's heart. She didn't understand why her brother had betrayed her. So, stubborn little Yvonne stopped approaching her brother. But at that time, her brother was basking in the adoration of everyone around him. Until one day, her brother happened to notice Yvonne in the hallway. Their eyes met briefly. Seeing the indifferent and disdainful expression on Yvonne's face, her brother realized what a foolish mistake he had made. Suddenly, he woke up with a start. Just as he was wondering why he had such a dream, Yvonne's unexpected question came. "Did you have a nightmare?" Startled, her brother sat up in bed, his face pale. Yvonne, while scolding him for drinking too much despite his low tolerance, handed him a hangover potion. After calming down, her brother asked Yvonne what she was doing there and why she had her hair up. Yvonne shrugged. "I'm not here for you to critique my hairstyle. I just heard you weren't feeling well, so I came to check on you." As soon as she finished speaking, her brother stopped drinking the potion. He couldn't believe Yvonne would actually come to visit him, because when he was sick in bed as a child, Yvonne had never come to see him. Hearing this, Yvonne shyly turned her head away, apologizing for being ignorant as a child and making him sad. With that, Yvonne bid farewell and prepared to leave. But her brother stopped her. He confessed that when Yvonne was ill the year before last, he had gone to her room. He was surprised that Yvonne, who never got sick, had been enduring her illness alone in her room for a week. But in the end, he hadn't been able to bring himself to enter. Yvonne nodded. She had thought it was just an ordinary illness. Then her brother told her that she had fallen ill after returning from the Crown Prince's birthday banquet, and that the banquet was just a few days away again. He asked if Yvonne was planning to attend this time. Hearing this, Yvonne instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Her brother exclaimed, "You're not actually going to attend this banquet, are you?" Yvonne angrily told her brother that she had long since wanted nothing to do with the Crown Prince, so of course she wouldn't go. Then, Yvonne poked her brother's forehead, telling him to rest well. Unexpectedly, under Yvonne's surprising strength, her brother was pushed back onto the bed like a piece of paper. After Yvonne left, her brother suddenly regretted telling Yvonne that information. Yvonne, too, was shocked by the news. She had been completely unaware of her own past illness, even though she had absorbed most of the original Yvonne's memories. She suspected that something must have happened to her at the palace. In this empire, there were very few people who would dare to harm Yvonne. Elsewhere, in Duke Air's mansion, the Duke was instructing his adjutant to prepare materials related to magic stones. These past few days, the adjutant had been busy gathering all the information he could find on magic stones in the market. But he didn't understand why the Duke was looking for magic stones. The Duke chuckled in response, and then announced to his advisors that he was going to call a meeting to monopolize all the magic stones in the empire. He then told his adjutant to refuse all visitors and not allow anyone near the meeting room. The adjutant thought the Duke had lost his mind to invest in such worthless junk. However, the Duke declared that he intended to give all the magic stones in the empire to Yvonne. Meanwhile, Yvonne was visiting the Duke's residence for the first time. She almost had second thoughts at the door. Fortunately, a maid provided a timely assist, urging the guards to quickly inform Duke heirs of her arrival. As soon as she entered, the Duke's servants, as if welcoming their future mistress, lined up on both sides to make way for Yvonne. Not long before, Yvonne had returned to her room and put her hair up, preparing to focus on her work and see if there were any other variables besides Sun's spring water. But after only 2 minutes, Eudora, worried that Yvonne was overworking herself and might experience low blood sugar, thoughtfully brought her desserts and drinks. With every bite Yvonne took, Eudora's face flushed a deeper red. Staring at Yvonne's slender, elegant fingers, Eudora's eyes sparkled with admiration. It turned out that ever since Yvonne had taken Eudora as her personal maid, Eudora had become Yvonne's biggest fan. No matter what Yvonne did, she would receive Eudora's effusive praise. After finishing the snacks, Yvonne was just about to get back to work when Eudora came back, clinging to Yvonne and asking if she wanted more snacks. Yvonne was truly exasperated. Just as Yvonne was about to be driven to distraction, Liana entered the room and stopped her sister. She apologized to Yvonne, explaining that Eudora had been spoiled since childhood, which led to her current personality. Yvonne looked at Eudora, who was cowering in the corner, and thought to herself that when Carol returned, she might not even have a job anymore. At that moment, Liana told Yvonne that she had completed all the tasks assigned by the lady-in-waiting. Now, they just needed to check for any errors. Yvonne was a little surprised. She asked Liana how she felt about the work and immediately heard Liana's praise. The lady-in-waiting was truly a genius to think of marking the map this way. This made Yvonne blush a little. Liana then added that this work gave her a certain kind of satisfaction. Seeing the neatly organized map made her feel very soothed. Their light and pleasant conversation also brought a long-absent smile to Liana's face. Suddenly, Yvonne pointed at Liana's arm in surprise. Unexpectedly, Liana's skin condition had improved. Both sisters were incredibly excited, but Yvonne seemed a little uneasy. Liana then took off her clothes to examine her skin and found that it was indeed much better than yesterday. The sisters happily thanked Yvonne, grateful that she was willing to use the precious sun's spring water to help treat her. But Yvonne just fiddled with her fingers, replying that it was fortunate, looking distracted. The sisters could see that Yvonne wasn't in a good mood, so they excused themselves. After they left, Yvonne plopped down on a chair. She hadn't expected that Sun's spring water would actually have the effect of healing skin diseases. Although she was happy that it had healed Liana, her own bath product plan was now ruined. She would have to tell her father the truth and ask for his help in buying magic stones for the treatment. Thinking of this, Yvonne couldn't help but worry that her father would kick her out. At this moment, Yvonne's gaze shifted to the pen on the side. She gently picked it up, remembering the image of the Duke circling the check. He was the only good man who would show her unlimited kindness without asking any questions. However, he was a royal investigator, so she couldn't ask him for help. But the next moment, Yvonne suddenly had an epiphany. She thought that as long as she had the Duke's handsome face, she didn't care about anything else. So, she called for Eudora and prepared to go out. Soon, the two arrived at Duke Ayre's mansion. But as soon as she got out of the carriage, Yvonne instantly calmed down. She had been too upset just now to do such a foolish thing. She quickly tried to get back into the carriage. At this moment, the Duke's guards inquired about their identity. Before Yvonne could react, Eudora quickly informed them that they were the lady-in-waiting from the Arseni Holtz family here to visit. She then patted her chest, urging the guards to be sure to inform Duke Ayres. So, within a minute, all the servants of the Duke's mansion came to greet them. Even Yvonne was startled by this scene. The butler cautiously asked Yvonne if she was here to see Duke Ayres. Yvonne, her intentions exposed, blushed instantly. Seeing this, the servants all smiled knowingly. Then, a maid quietly reminded them that the Duke was currently in a meeting. Hearing this, Yvonne wanted to use this as an excuse to leave. However, the next moment, the servants lined up in 2 rows, urging Yvonne to go in quickly. Eudora also pushed Yvonne forward from behind. Thus, Yvonne walked through the midst of the servants' well wishes. Anyone who didn't know better would think she was a bride coming to her wedding. However, there was a red-haired maid in the crowd who seemed out of place. While everyone else was discussing what a divine couple the Duke and the lady-in-waiting were, she turned away dismissively and went back to work. Although everyone else was happy about the lady-in-waiting and the Duke, she was not, because she had seen Yvonne's true, wicked nature. She would never let such a woman get close to her master. My most love-struck man, in order to make his sweetheart accept his gift without burden, planned to buy all the magic stones on the market. He would then sell them to the girl for 1 coin each. Upon arriving at the Duke's mansion, Yvonne was welcomed as the future Duchess. Seeing the dazzling array of desserts on the table, Yvonne was taken aback. The amount of desserts here was almost equivalent to her daily intake. She cautiously asked Eudora if this was too much, but Eudora thought it was only natural. Then she quietly reminded Yvonne that perhaps she shouldn't wear her work hairstyle when meeting the Duke. Hearing this, Yvonne frantically tried to undo her updo, but before she had time to fix her hair, the Duke's head maid came to greet Yvonne. Yvonne had no choice but to greet her first, but the head maid remained rooted to the spot, refusing to leave. She insisted on attending to the future Duchess perfectly. In an instant, all the Duke's servants flooded the room, awaiting Yvonne's command. Yvonne felt a little embarrassed by the servants' hushed gossiping, but as she listened, she couldn't help but wonder if the Duke truly favored her. The head maid, seeing Yvonne only sipping her tea, suggested she try some of the desserts. They had been carefully selected to complement the tea. Yvonne, in a relaxed mood, was always amenable to suggestions. She happily prepared to enjoy the desserts, but the moment she put a pastry in her mouth, she was startled. The taste of the dessert reminded her of a gathering she had attended in her past life. That gathering had been hosted by a noble lady. Because the crown prince was in attendance, Yvonne unsurprisingly had also been there, but her personality back then was destined to be unpopular. She had nearly brought the festive atmosphere to a standstill the moment she arrived. But Yvonne hadn't cared. Simply seeing the crown prince was enough to satisfy her. However, to her surprise, the noble lady had instructed her servants to tamper with her dessert. While other guests enjoyed soft, fragrant cakes, Yvonne had been given only dry, hard biscuits. One bite nearly chipped her teeth. It was then that Yvonne realized she was being treated differently. Not only the biscuits, but even the tea had been made with dirty water. Seeing the two red-haired servants smirking smugly, Yvonne hadn't gotten angry on the spot. Instead, she had smiled and asked everyone if they felt a strange rumbling. As soon as she finished speaking, the items on the table began to shake violently. All the nobles at the gathering were sent scrambling in fear. And the one who had caused all this was Yvonne, the person everyone looked down upon. Looking at the disheveled appearance of the nobles who had just been mocking her, a slight smile played on Yvonne's lips. The tricks those nobles had played now seemed like nothing more than childish pranks. Her thoughts returned to the Duke's mansion. Yvonne crunched on the unpleasant dessert and gulped down a large mouthful of tea. She thought that perhaps the servants had made it so unpalatable by accident. It was best not to show her displeasure. But the next moment, the head maid approached and asked if she wanted more, leaving Yvonne unsure how to respond. Just then, the butler returned with an apologetic look on his face. He reported that the Duke was currently in a meeting and had instructed that no one was to disturb him. Yvonne felt a little embarrassed. After all, she had arrived unannounced. She cheerfully rose to leave, thanking everyone for their hospitality. However, she had barely taken 2 steps when the head maid called her back, signaling to the butler with a look to make sure the Duke didn't let this opportunity slip away. But Yvonne told him not to bother. Perhaps the Duke really was in an important meeting. She could visit another time. Suddenly, a gruff voice rang out. A breathless figure blocked Yvonne's path, asking the lady-in-waiting if the tea and desserts weren't to her liking, as she had only taken a single bite. Yvonne was about to politely reply, when she suddenly remembered. This was the same maid who had made those brick-like biscuits for her before. And she clearly remembered the wronged expression on the maid's face when she had splashed dirty water on her. Now, seeing that pockmarked face again, the temperature around Yvonne plummeted. She didn't believe the Duke was the same as that noble lady. So, today's incident must have been this maid's own doing. She told the maid that she had eaten lunch before coming, so she wasn't hungry. Although her tone was calm and emotionless, it made the maid's heart pound with fear. As Yvonne passed by her, she softly added that she would tell the Duke she had been treated well, so the maid needn't worry too much. With that, she turned and left without looking back, leaving the maid standing there, filled with unease. Meanwhile, in the meeting room, the Duke's subordinates were tactfully advising him against purchasing the magic stone mines. They argued that magic stone production was low, and the Duke might face pressure from higher-ups. The adjutant even bluntly stated that only a fool would gift a mine. So, the clever Duke decided to buy all the magic stone mines and then drive down the price, selling them to Yvonne for 1 coin each. Just then, the head maid and the butler interrupted him. They had a very important matter to report. The Duke sighed. "What is it?" "The lady-in-waiting from the Arseny Holtz family is here to see you, Your Grace." The moment he heard this, The Duke immediately threw down his chair, plastered a charming smile on his face, and rushed to the door, ordering everyone to acquire all the magic stones first. He completely forgot about the people in the meeting room. The wicked lady-in-waiting, scorned by the world, was actually a kind-hearted soul. Seeing an assassin about to harm a little girl, she had reduced him to ashes with a single move. And the little girl she had saved was Carol. From that moment on, Carol had sworn her loyalty to Yvonne. Not long ago, the Duke learned that Yvonne had come to his mansion to see him. He abandoned the meeting and rushed to find Yvonne. But when he opened the door, he only found the head maid. When the Duke asked about Yvonne's whereabouts, the head maid launched into a lengthy explanation. He quickly turned and dashed after Yvonne. Seeing the mansion gates firmly closed, the Duke took a powerful leap, vaulting cleanly over the 3-meter-high barrier. However, Yvonne was already seated in her carriage, heading home. Just moments before, the head maid had presented the Duke with the desserts served to Yvonne, revealing they were made of dirt and sand. The Duke was furious, vowing to investigate the matter thoroughly. But his immediate priority was to find Yvonne and explain. Meanwhile, Carol made her way alone to a narrow alley, knocking on a specific door. After exchanging a coded phrase with the person inside, a man emerged to greet her. Without pausing for pleasantries, Carol asked to see her aunt. Inside, a woman sat facing the door, radiating an aura of authority. Hearing the knock, she coldly inquired about the visitor's purpose. When Carol stepped inside, the woman's eyes lit up and she rushed forward. "My little kitten, you've returned," she exclaimed, embracing Carol tightly. "You've been that mad dog lady-in-waiting's maid for 5 years. Finally decided to come home, have you?" Carol immediately pushed her aunt away. "Please don't call Lady Yvonne a mad dog, or I'll never visit you again." Seeing Carol's anger, the woman quickly promised not to repeat the offense. However, a moment later, she slipped up again. "That lady-in-waiting has a terrible temper. She must be difficult to serve. Come sit down. Your aunt will take good care of you." Carol immediately corrected her. "Lady Yvonne is not like that at all. Doesn't the Intelligence Guild's information need updating?" She then solemnly instructed her aunt to record the following in Lady Yvonne's file. "Lady Yvonne is handsome and beautiful and an incredibly talented woman." Carol then handed over a request. Her aunt boasted that she would fulfill any request from her niece. But when she opened the envelope, she discovered it was a request to investigate information regarding Sun's Springwater and the Duke Carden's family, the Queen Mother's relatives. Her aunt teased, "Does Lady Yvonne desperately need Sun's Springwater?" But Carol confidently replied, "Lady Yvonne is already perfect. She doesn't need anything like that." Carol's devoted demeanor made her aunt suspect Yvonne had bewitched her. Nevertheless, she agreed to send agents to investigate her niece's request. After her aunt left, Carol finally had time to look around. The layout hadn't changed since she had last lived there. A photograph of Carol and her aunt sat on the table. The man in the photo was Carol's father, the former head of the Intelligence Guild. One day, he had been assassinated. The moment her father's coffin was lowered into the ground, Carol became the next guild leader. However, before Carol could emerge from the grief of losing her father, the assassins returned. Their target was Carol, the heir to the guild. Overwhelmed by terror, Carol even saw the moment of her own death. Facing the assassin's attack, she helplessly and desperately raised her hands to protect herself. But before she felt the agonizing pain of being torn apart, a clear voice rang out from behind her. As expected, this is something an insect would do. The assassin's body then exploded before them. Looking at the motionless man, Yvonne appeared as calm as if she had just stepped on an ant. She walked past Carol, not giving Carol a chance to thank her. Yvonne's concerned words came first. "It's dangerous in the rain. Go home." From that moment, Carol vowed to repay Yvonne. Even if Lady Yvonne didn't remember the incident, Carol never would. Suddenly, Carol noticed the photograph on the table had fallen over. She reached out to straighten it, but as she picked it up, she realized the stack of requests included one: investigating the resale of rhodia grass. The lovesick Duke had finally confessed his feelings to his beloved. He grabbed Yvonne's hand and placed it over his heart. "Whenever I see you, my heart races." Yvonne felt the Duke's heartbeat, a blush creeping onto her fair cheeks. However, at this crucial moment, the flamboyant crown prince appeared out of nowhere. Not long ago, Yvonne had left the Duke's mansion. Having spent half the day there without seeing the Duke, she felt listless in the carriage. Eudora consoled her, saying the Duke was busy with important matters. Yvonne knew this, but she still felt inexplicably dejected. Suddenly, the carriage jolted over a stone, sending Yvonne's head crashing against the wall. The string of misfortunes brought tears to her eyes. She felt like a fool, alone in her expectations, disappointed by the Duke's kindness. She'd allowed herself the illusion that everyone held goodwill towards her. But in reality, she was still the villainess, unable to escape the disdain hidden beneath the surface. Disgusted, Yvonne decided to give up, accepting it as her just deserts. Eudora was completely bewildered. Though Yvonne despaired for her future, she forced a smile and gave Eudora a thumbs up. Just then, Eudora heard someone shouting. She went to the window to check. Then she urged Yvonne to look outside. Yvonne opened the window, poked her head out, and saw the Duke sprinting towards them at what seemed like 50 meters per second. Yvonne's jaw dropped. She hurriedly exited the carriage and inquired about his sudden appearance. Meanwhile, the little maid was already anticipating a good show. Sure enough, the next moment, the Duke reached out his hand, finding Yvonne's. I heard the lady-in-waiting came to see me, but when I came out, you were already gone. So this time, I came to find you. Holding the Duke's hand, Yvonne's earlier disappointment vanished, replaced by a strange flutter in her chest. She asked if she had interrupted him, mentioning that she'd heard it was an important meeting. The Duke declared that such things were insignificant compared to Yvonne. Furthermore, if he had known she was coming, he would have canceled the meeting outright. He then extended an invitation, hoping to have another chance to properly entertain her. Yvonne's eyes lit up. She hadn't expected the Duke to come all this way just for this. She was the unexpected guest, after all. Yet he continued to treat her with such unconditional kindness. Smiling, she accepted his offer. The Duke, about to express his delight, was met with Yvonne's gentle refusal. Not today, she said, perhaps next time. She felt he still had matters to attend to and didn't want to impose. A flicker of disappointment crossed the Duke's face. I understand. I'll invite you again next time. So, what brings you here today? He asked. Yvonne suddenly remembered something and began rummaging in her bag. She had a gift for him, a token of gratitude for keeping her secret. A mere nickname wasn't enough. She revealed a fountain pen. The Duke stared at it for a moment. Yvonne, mistaking his silence for disapproval, blushed and began to ramble, explaining that it was custom-made, one of a kind. The Duke agreed that it was beautiful, but what truly mattered was that it was a gift from Yvonne. The simple compliment nearly made Yvonne's heart leap from her chest. To regain her composure, she turned to leave. However, the Duke stopped her. Having accepted a gift, he was obligated to reciprocate. I would be honored if you would join me for dinner tonight. This clever maneuver stunned Yvonne. It was still broad daylight, and he was already thinking about dinner. His intentions exposed, the Duke dropped the pretense, admitting he simply didn't want her to leave. Yvonne longed to ask why, but lacked the courage. She simply stated that it wasn't convenient. The Duke, mistaking her words for a desire to avoid him, looked like a crestfallen puppy. He earnestly assured her that he felt perfectly comfortable in her company. Without giving her time to respond, he took her hand, placed it over his heart, and shyly confessed, "Whenever I see you, my heart races." The sudden confession brought a blush to Yvonne's cheeks, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She was about to ask for clarification when a sharp neigh echoed from the distance. A luxurious carriage approached, and the Crown Prince emerged, as flamboyant as ever. "Greetings. It's been a while." Though annoyed by his interruption, Yvonne, bound by propriety, offered a respectful curtsy. A thought crossed her mind. Was the Duke acting on the Crown Prince's orders? But the Duke's icy glare suggested otherwise. The Crown Prince then revealed his purpose. He presented Yvonne with an envelope, causing her face to drain of color. She couldn't imagine what gift he could possibly offer. It had to be an arrest warrant from the palace. However, the Crown Prince explained that it was an invitation to his birthday banquet, and he wished for her to attend as his partner. The Crown Prince, who once regarded her as a mere trinket, now invited her as his partner to his birthday celebration. Looking at the proffered invitation, a sharp pang of pain shot through Yvonne's heart. A torrent of memories flooded her mind. This was everything Yuanshan had yearned for, craved. Yuanshan's past infatuation with the Crown Prince threatened to overwhelm Yvonne, compelling her to accept. Barely managing to retain control, she blurted out, "Go," in a desperate attempt to anchor herself to the present. Silence descended. As the Crown Prince stared at her in disbelief, Yvonne's face burned with shame and anger. She couldn't accept this. The proud and confident original Yvonne, Yuan-shin, was surprisingly filled with loneliness and self-reproach. She even yearned for such a greasy character as the Crown Prince. So, Yvonne strode towards him. "Your Highness, you've truly gone too far. You've invited every young lady of age as your partner. Even those mere viscount's daughters have received an invitation. Yet I, a lady-in-waiting of the esteemed Arsanhol's family, have not." With that, she snatched the invitation and tore it to shreds right in front of the Crown Prince. She refused to let Yuan-shin continue to pine after this oily man. Her words also serve as a convenient excuse for her refusal. "I will not attend this banquet. You should find another partner." Watching the shredded invitation, the Crown Prince's pride crumbled along with it. His face darkened as he questioned Yvonne. "How dare you tear up the invitation I personally prepared?" For a moment, Yvonne felt a pang of nervousness. But the next moment, the Crown Prince reverted to his usual arrogant self, claiming that such impudence was part of a lady-in-waiting's charm. Yvonne was speechless, but the Crown Prince wouldn't let anyone challenge his authority. There will be no next time for such behavior. He then informed Yvonne that tearing up the invitation was pointless. This banquet was special. Every family that received an invitation was obligated to attend, but I doubt anyone would be willing to be a lady-in-waiting's partner. At such an event, you should know what kind of ridicule you'll face. Yvonne gritted her teeth. Even so, she refused to be the Crown Prince's partner. Just then, a voice interrupted them. "If the lady-in-waiting doesn't mind, I would be honored to be her partner." Looking at the Duke's outstretched hand, Yvonne felt a surge of gratitude, but she was also puzzled. Shouldn't the Crown Prince be the Duke's superior? Why was he helping her? The Crown Prince scoffed, then extended his own hand, inviting Yvonne to be his partner. The two men locked eyes, vying for Yvonne's attention. Seeing their immediate animosity, Yvonne was utterly bewildered. Weren't they supposed to be on the same side? Could it be that the Duke's kindness towards her all this time was genuine? Why had she been so blind to his goodwill? As an orphan in her past life, she had endured countless betrayals and manipulations. She thought she finally had a loving family, but they only saw her as a means to an end, a tool to collect benefits. Abandoned time and time again, she had come to believe that people only approached her with ulterior motives. As the Crown Prince and the Duke watched in astonishment, she placed her hand in the Duke's. "It would be my honor to be your partner, Your Grace." The Duke gently kissed the back of her hand. This was the man who had shown her unconditional kindness from the very beginning. As they shared a tender moment, the Crown Prince impatiently interrupted. "Enough with the charade." He clapped the Duke on the shoulder. "You must have heard the rumors. The lady-in-waiting's heart doesn't belong to you. She's only using you to win my affections." Yvonne was momentarily speechless at his narcissism. She immediately turned to explain to the Duke, worried he might believe the Crown Prince's nonsense. But the Duke seemed unfazed. Instead, he took her hand. Those who shine brightest are often the target of slander. The compliment made Yvonne blush and lower her head. The Crown Prince, still persistent, pressed Yvonne. "Are you sure you won't regret this decision?" "Of course not," she replied firmly, and quickly excused herself, claiming she was tired from standing in the sun. The Duke escorted her back to the carriage, completely disregarding the scowling Crown Prince. The Crown Prince seethed, watching the affectionate pair. He scoffed inwardly. They had no choice in the matter. The Duke and Yvonne's relationship had taken a significant step forward. He declared his feelings for her were genuine. Not long ago, the Crown Prince had invited Yvonne to be his partner at the banquet. Thankfully, the Duke had intervened and become her escort instead. On the way back, Yvonne thanked the Duke, who then inquired about ordering her dress. Yvonne was surprised. She had assumed he was merely helping her save face. The Duke stopped, looking at her sincerely. "I don't joke about inviting someone to be my partner. I meant every word." The sudden confession turned Yvonne into a blushing, sputtering mess. Back in the carriage, she was still flustered. Eudora, curious, asked Yvonne about the tense atmosphere she had witnessed between her, the Crown Prince, and the Duke. But now, Yvonne and the Duke seemed incredibly close. What had happened? Yvonne explained that she and the Duke would be attending the banquet together. Eudora immediately began plotting, determined to help them choose matching outfits. The mention of outfits reminded Yvonne of the Duke's confession, sending her temperature soaring again. Eudora, noticing her blush, understood. Meanwhile, The Duke's first order of business upon returning home was to find his aide, who had been tirelessly assisting with his courtship of Yvonne. Now, he was also tasked with investigating the culprit behind Yvonne's stony desert. Dark circles underscored his aide's tired eyes as several servants bowed before the Duke. The butler informed him that these individuals were the ones most closely involved in the dessert's preparation. When the Duke questioned them, the head chef quickly admitted fault. After all, the incident occurred under his watch. He bore some responsibility. However, the blonde-haired maid insisted she was innocent. She claimed she had used the dough prepared by the red-haired kitchen maid. The red-haired maid, in turn, denied the accusation. She argued that the dough had been prepared collaboratively, making it impossible to determine who was responsible. She even shifted the blame onto the blonde, insinuating that she had added something to the dessert. The falsely accused blonde bristled with indignation. Neither maid yielded an inch, arguing their cases before the Duke. The aide, having already heard their conflicting accounts, suspected this was no mere accident. The Duke, seeing the lack of progress, grew stern. "You have always been loyal to the Arsant family," he warned, "and I want to believe you. But I will not tolerate unanswered questions in this matter." His words drained the color from the servants' faces. The Duke produced a gleaming gem. "I am the head of the Arsant family," he declared, seemingly without context. The gem remained inert. But when he added, "I will pardon anyone involved in this." "I am the head of the Arsant family," he declared, seemingly without context. The gem remained inert. But when he added, "I will pardon anyone involved in this," the gem pulsed with a vibrant red light. He explained, "This is a Monstone, a magical gem. Its sole purpose is to react to falsehoods." The red-haired maid visibly wilted, beads of sweat forming on her brow. The Duke approached her directly. "Let's start with you," he said. The Duke's gaze hardened as he observed the maid's growing unease. The case was swiftly resolved. The head chef received a pay cut. Observing the red-haired maid's clear discomfort, the Duke's gaze grew colder. The case was quickly resolved. The head chef received a pay cut, and the implicated maid was dismissed from the household. The aide felt this punishment was too lenient. The Duke, however, claimed his hands were tied. He, too, would have preferred a harsher punishment, perhaps feeding the culprit to the monsters. But he had more pressing matters to attend to. The aide, recognizing the faraway look in his eyes, correctly surmised that something positive had transpired between the Duke and Yvonne. However, he was still puzzled by the Monstone. He'd never heard of such a thing. The Duke, producing the stone again, explained it was merely a trinket that changed color with a touch of magic. The aide was dumbfounded. The Duke, it turned out, had already deduced the truth from the servant's subtle expressions. The Duke then instructed his aide to book an appointment at a dressmaker's. He needed an outfit for the royal banquet. As he turned to leave, he clapped the aide on the shoulder, boasting, "I'm going with Yvonne." This time, however, the aide's expression was grim. Urgent news had arrived from the Arsant territory. Unprecedented monsters had appeared within their lands. He assumed the Duke would prioritize this serious matter. Instead, the Duke simply declared, "Then I'll have to leave for the dressmakers immediately." The aide, still concerned, reminded him about the intelligence report regarding the third prince. The Duke glanced over the report, learning the reason behind the third prince's previous rejection. He then assigned another task to his aide: find any and all methods for curing idiocy. This time, he was determined to win the third prince over. The crown prince's neglect of his fiancée and his invitation to another girl to his birthday banquet had enraged the princess. She was supposed to be his lover, yet he chose that wicked girl instead. Consumed by rage, she contemplated summoning her most powerful familiar to end Yvonne's life while she slept. Yvonne had recently returned home, her cheeks still flushed. She was thrilled that her escort for the banquet, even if it was the crown prince's birthday, would be the Duke. Despite the occasion, her heart fluttered with anticipation. Suddenly, her old insecurities resurfaced. Did the Duke truly mean what he said? Did he really like her? Two miniature versions of herself appeared above her head, bickering. "You have to ask him directly." One insisted, "Look at this. If someone does this without genuine feelings, they should be arrested. But what if he doesn't mean it?" The other countered, "I've been nothing but trouble for him. Why would he have feelings for me?" The miniature Yvonne's reached no conclusion. Dismissing these anxieties, Yvonne resolved to test the waters when she next saw the Duke. As she returned to her room, a shocking sight met her eyes. Liana sat on the floor, writhing in pain, her skin affliction visibly worsened. Both Yvonne and Eudora rushed to her side. Eudora, clutching her sister's hand, apologized profusely. It was all her fault, she lamented. She hadn't realized the sunspring water couldn't heal Liana's memories. Liana, despite the agony, reassured Yvonne that she was fine. Yvonne knew this recurring despair was taking a toll on Liana. She longed to tell Liana about the other potion, but doubted she would believe in the rhodia grass's efficacy. Seeing Liana's suffering, she decided to try anyway. In a voice carefully devoid of emotion, she addressed Liana. "Do you remember when I said I would use you? I have another potion, but I need to experiment with it on you." Liana trembled at her words. "My lady, you really were using me all along." Yvonne's face remained impassive. She didn't believe in offering false comfort. Empty platitudes only bred false hope, making the eventual disappointment all the more bitter. Even if Liana chose to leave because of this, Yvonne wouldn't pretend her actions were for Liana's benefit. Liana, for her part, now had her answer. Just as Yvonne braced herself for Liana's rejection, Liana surprised her with a smile. "My lady, you're too honest," she said, "but it's all right. As your secretary, I'll fill in the gaps where you fall short, because I already belong to you, my lady." Yvonne, taken aback by Liana's unwavering trust, remained stubbornly silent. Quickly turning her back, tears of unexpected joy welled in her eyes. "Don't you dare go back on your word now," she murmured. Meanwhile, in the royal palace, Cordelia raged, tearing apart her room in frustration. This banquet was the most crucial event for determining the crown princess. Yet, the crown prince hadn't chosen her. Instead, he'd invited that wicked girl as his partner. She bit her lip until it bled, consumed by hatred. Her plans had been thwarted at every turn lately. Even the rhodia grass had been snatched from under her nose. Suddenly, she connected the two incidents. A chilling smile spread across her face. She was convinced Yvonne was behind everything, vying for the position of crown princess. In that case, she had to devise a plan. Perhaps she could summon her most powerful familiar while Yvonne slept, and eliminate her once and for all. But that was incredibly risky. If discovered, she wouldn't escape unscathed. So, she decided to seek help from someone else. Someone who had rescued her from poverty and hardship. The only son in her life, being with the Empress forever. Cordelia was desperate to become the crown princess. That way, she could truly become a part of the Empress's family. But she could never have imagined that the Empress, who had once been so kind and treated her like a daughter, would now turn against her. Cordelia's early life had been a struggle, devoid of parental care. To survive in such harsh conditions, young Cordelia relied on her meager healing magic, tending to people's injuries in exchange for a pittance. It was less living and more clinging to existence. Yet even then, thugs targeted her, demanding all her money. Just when she thought she would be trapped forever in this hellish prison, the thugs were suddenly subdued. Before she could react, footsteps approached from behind. It was the only person who had ever offered her a helping hand. Her red hair, like the sun, illuminated Cordelia's life. The Empress gave her things she'd never had before. She gently brushed her hair, saying she felt like she had gained a lovely daughter. Cordelia's devotion to the Empress became absolute. She thought she finally had a family who loved her. But then, one day, the Empress claimed to have found her birth parents. They were the most powerful figures in the kingdom, the Emperor and Empress. But Cordelia felt no joy. She regretted not speaking her mind. After the Empress left, her birth parents shunned her for her illegitimate status. Unable to send her away again, they sent Cordelia to a remote estate. As she plotted her return to the Empress, a man approached her. He claimed he could help her, but she would have to learn his dark magic. Despite her aversion to dark magic, the thought of becoming part of the Empress's family drove Cordelia to accept. Under the man's guidance, Cordelia orchestrated a monster attack on the crown prince. Then, she used her healing magic to save him. She thought this would secure her position as crown princess. But then, Yvonne appeared, disrupting everything. She yearned to eliminate Yvonne with her own hands. But she forced herself to remain calm. The Empress would surely be on her side. Meanwhile, a woman approached the Empress. She expressed concern about Cordelia. She couldn't understand why the crown prince would abandon his lover and invite the lady-in-waiting he used to despise as his partner. The empress remained unfazed. She simply stated that even if Cordelia didn't become the crown princess, she would always hold a special place in her heart. But the woman was frantic. She believed Cordelia's only value was as a key, opening the gate of liberation by becoming the crown princess. You must understand, we've invested so much in this. We scoured the entire Malay kingdom to find this illegitimate princess. The woman's voice was tight with anxiety. Then, we painstakingly taught her dark magic ourselves. We orchestrated her meeting with the crown prince. But if he's fallen for a mere maid, all our efforts will be for nothing. She urged the empress to find a solution. But in the next moment, the empress's expression darkened. I believe I told you not to speak of this so carelessly. The woman recoiled, startled by the empress's chilling tone. She thought they were alone. The empress, seemingly talking to herself, walked towards the exit. Years ago, someone infiltrated this place. Though he was lucky enough to escape, he was cursed. By now, he's probably dead. As she spoke, she summoned a familiar. Swiftly, the familiar seized Cordelia, who had been hiding in the bushes. The empress approached slowly. Her words, chillingly unfamiliar, sent a shiver down Cordelia's spine. I wonder what happens to those afflicted by my curse, Cordelia. The empress then curtly dismissed the woman, who, knowing her transgression, used teleportation magic to flee the palace. Cordelia was terrified. She couldn't believe the empress, once so kind, had been using her all along. The empress silenced her with a gesture and then cast a dark spell on Cordelia. From this moment forward, Cordelia would never be free of her. Even as tears of pain streamed down Cordelia's face, the empress didn't stop. Instead, she smiled, reassuring her. After all, you are the key I worked so hard to obtain. Once a street urchin, Cordelia had been showered with affection by the empress, becoming the happiest little princess in the world. But as she grew older, she overheard the truth about her past, that every hardship she had endured had been meticulously orchestrated by the empress, even more cruelly to ensure Cordelia's silence. The empress had placed a cruel curse upon her. Any attempt to seek help would result in unimaginable agony. Witnessing the empress's betrayal firsthand, Cordelia's heart shattered. Everything she had done was to become a part of the empress's family. Soon after, the empress returned to the palace. Her secret exposed, the false smile was gone, replaced by an icy indifference. She summoned the crown prince. The unusual tension in the room made him uneasy. The empress rose and approached him. Mother is truly hurt. You decided on your banquet partner without even consulting me, and you've already announced your fiancé, yet you choose someone else as your partner. As the crown prince of the empire, is this appropriate? Guilt pricked the crown prince. He knew the banquet partner would be the future crown princess. But now, he wanted to be true to his heart. Although he had once despised the maid, and had gone to great lengths to avoid her, it wasn't until she was truly gone that he realized how much she meant to him. He cared deeply for the maid who had loved him so devotedly. A subtle smile played on the empress's lips. She patted his shoulder. If your feelings are genuine, then Mother will do everything in her power to help you. She called for a servant and instructed him, deliver an invitation to the Arsant maid, along with this dress. The dress symbolized the empress's authority. Even the haughty Arsant maid wouldn't dare ignore it. After leaving the empress, the crown prince was secretly delighted. He eagerly anticipated Duke Arsant's reaction. He would claim the maid at the banquet, forcing the Duke to recognize the vast difference in their status. Just then, someone approached. It was Cordelia, her spirit broken. The crown prince felt a pang of annoyance. He didn't want to deal with her, but fearing she would cling to him, he decided to offer an apology. Before he could speak, Cordelia walked past him, ignoring him completely. He was taken aback, but quickly dismissed it. At least he wouldn't have to apologize. Back in her room, Cordelia slammed the door shut and collapsed on the floor, still trembling. Everything had been a lie from the very beginning. She had been a fool, manipulated and used. Tears streamed down her face, her sorrow transforming into rage. She refused to be a pawn in their game. Meanwhile, Duke Arsant had urgently dealt with a monster infestation in his territory. He instructed his soldiers to document the incident and report it to the royal family. He was eager to return to the capital and continue his courtship of Yvonne. Then, a soldier informed him that several merchants had come to the territory that morning, trying to sell moonstones. He had dismissed them as swindlers assuming no one would buy such expensive and useless stones. The Duke's face hardened. Those were for me. He ordered a soldier to rush back with the money and retrieve the Moonstones. On his way back to the estate, the Duke suddenly froze. A boisterous crowd had gathered at the entrance, and upon seeing him, their expressions turned ravenous, like a pack of wolves. The Duke's face paled. He was supposed to be playing the role of a lovesick fool, but in reality, he was incredibly popular. News of his return had spread like wildfire, drawing a throng of people to his doorstep. Their expressions, upon seeing him, were undeniably predatory. After the Duke kindly inquired about their purpose, several people pushed forward their eligible daughters. The Duke politely smiled and declined, but that wasn't the end of it. His desk was piled high with marriage proposals. His nanny informed him that upon hearing of his supposed courtship, other families had eagerly offered their daughters, some even traveling vast distances for a chance to meet him. The Duke was puzzled. Did everyone doubt his pursuit of Yvonne so much? The sheer volume of proposals left his nanny speechless for a moment. She then inquired about his progress with Yvonne. Upon hearing his response, she burst into laughter. Even she had initially assumed the Duke was merely trying to avoid arranged marriages with powerful families. She hadn't realized his feelings for Yvonne were genuine. "Our Duke is so perfect," she exclaimed. "I'm sure he'll capture her heart in no time." But the Duke's gaze became uncertain. He had privately invited Yvonne out several times, but she had refused each time. However, they had held hands, and she had agreed to be his banquet partner. His nanny, surprised to learn he was the one pursuing Yvonne, cautiously offered her analysis. "If your dates meet these 3 criteria," she explained, "you still have a chance. First, a woman will always want to see the person she admires. Second, they'll maintain eye contact. And third, they'll share personal details like hobbies and interests. It's the best way to get to know someone. Do any of these apply?" The Duke's heart sank. He realized he met none of the criteria. Seeing him fidgeting restlessly, his nanny offered comfort. "Perhaps she's just not good at expressing herself," she suggested. "And you'll be her partner at the banquet, won't you?" Such occasions are often a good opportunity for 2 people to grow closer. The Duke's imagination took flight. Yvonne's beautiful face seemed so close, igniting a desire to possess her. He quickly banished the thought. Action was more effective than wishful thinking. He needed to return to the capital and prepare for the banquet. Meanwhile, Yvonne was searching frantically for Liana. The Rhodia grass bath lotion samples had arrived, but Liana was nowhere to be found. Had she gone out? Or perhaps she was lost in the sprawling mansion. Yvonne decided to go look for her. Just then, her brother, the 3rd prince, stopped her. "Where are you rushing off to?" he asked. He had heard Yvonne was looking for her secretary, Liana. He gestured towards his room. "Your secretary is sleeping in my room." Yvonne's face contorted in disbelief. Her hard-won secretary, the very next day, was in her brother's bed. Yvonne grabbed her brother, her eyes blazing with fury. "What happened?" she demanded. Her grip was so tight, her brother nearly fainted. Thankfully, Liana appeared just in time to explain. A few hours earlier, she had been working in the study. The weather was exceptionally hot, and she had quickly become drenched in sweat. Hoping to clear her head, she had decided to take a walk in the courtyard. Yvonne interrupted, confused as to why Liana would wear such heavy clothing in the heat. Liana explained she wanted to protect her wounds from dirt and keep them hidden from view. On her way to the courtyard, she had suddenly felt dizzy and had woken up in the 3rd prince's room. Yvonne immediately glared at her brother, suspecting foul play. He pleaded with Liana to corroborate his story. Liana confirmed that the 3rd prince had helped her. Yvonne remained suspicious. Why was Liana in her brother's room? Didn't she have her own? As the siblings bickered, Liana recalled what had happened before she lost consciousness. The heat had indeed made her dizzy, and she had collapsed. She vaguely remembered people gathering around her, but no one offered assistance. Instead, they whispered about her skin condition right in front of her. Liana lay helpless on the ground, berating herself for expecting kindness. She was, after all, a hideous monster. Then, someone lifted her up. It was the young Duke who had saved her. He protested the crowd's foolishness. If it were truly contagious, Yvonne would have been infected long ago. Yet he, too, had looked at her with that same apprehensive gaze. Confused, Liana fainted. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself lying in a luxurious bed. To ascertain her location, Liana turned her head. Unexpectedly, she saw the young Duke manipulating magic, creating miniature whirlwinds. Startled, she abruptly sat up, but her weakened body immediately collapsed back onto the bed. Learning from the young Duke that she was in his room, Lyanna prepared to excuse herself and leave. However, she noticed bandages neatly wrapped around her body. She instinctively covered her chest with her hands. Seeing Lyanna's misunderstanding, the third prince quickly explained that he hadn't touched her. He hadn't seen anything. The female physician had tended to her wounds. Hearing this, Lyanna relaxed. She said she hadn't suspected the young Duke. But the third prince knew exactly what her expression had meant a moment ago. Since Lyanna was awake, he intended to leave, but she called him back. Lyanna hesitantly voiced her confusion. Didn't the young Duke hate her? The third prince was baffled. He had barely met Lyanna. Suddenly, the scene of their first encounter flashed through his mind. He immediately understood the source of her misunderstanding. Resignedly, he explained that his behavior then was due to his poor health. It was you, he added, who saw me as superficial trash. Before leaving, he told Lyanna that even if he truly disliked her, as a member of the Arsan house, it was his duty to care for her. These simple words stirred something within Lyanna. Looking at the two before her, so concerned for her well-being, she realized the maid and the young Duke were alike in many ways. With Lyanna found, Yvonne excitedly presented the Rhodia grass bath lotion, eager for Lyanna to try it. However, Lyanna showed no enthusiasm. She had lost all hope of a cure. Fortunately, Eudora was willing to give it a try. The two sisters took the lotion, preparing to apply it. In truth, Yvonne considered Lyanna's lack of expectation a good thing. The Rhodia grass only treated the specific skin disease prevalent in the original story. If Lyanna's condition was different, it would only plunge her further into despair. In that case, Yvonne could only rely on the original Yvonne's exceptional magical talent. Although Lyanna believed magic couldn't cure her, Yvonne, as a powerful mage, might be different. By consuming Mondstones and recovering some of her magic, she might be able to completely cure Lyanna's illness. However, she felt a pang of reluctance. It was, after all, the Duke's first gift to her. Meanwhile, Lyanna had finished bathing. As Eudora was about to help her sister dry off, her expression suddenly changed. She couldn't believe that her being expelled from the family and losing her inheritance rights was her aunt's doing. It turned out her aunt, in order to seize power with her cousin, had orchestrated Lyanna's incurable skin disease. Afterwards, she had feigned concern, constantly sending nutrient supplements, which are the true cause of the skin disease. Not long ago, Yvonne had urged Lyanna to use the Rhodia grass bath lotion to treat her skin disease. Suddenly, she heard Eudora's cry. She saw that the red spots on Lyanna's body had faded. Lyanna stared in disbelief. Unable to contain herself, she began to cry. This was vastly different from the sun's spring water. She could feel her skin healing. Hearing this, Eudora sank to the ground in relief. For so long, her sister had suffered so much pain and injustice because of her illness. Now that her sister was reborn, she wept with joy. The sight of the two sisters, overwhelmed with joy and excitement, brought Yvonne some comfort. Just then, a carrier pigeon flew in through the window. After reading the message, Yvonne realized it was intelligence from Carol. Although they hadn't gathered all the evidence yet, they were close. The letter contained information about Lyanna's nutrient supplements. Yvonne asked Lyanna what she knew about them. Lyanna knew nothing, only that the supplements seemed to alleviate her symptoms, so she had continued taking them. Yvonne's expression turned serious. According to Lyanna, the supplements were provided by the Cardin family. However, the investigation revealed that the supplements actually contained ingredients that weakened the skin. On the surface, they appeared to make the skin softer, but with the slightest irritation, the skin would ulcerate and develop wounds. Lyanna couldn't believe that her illness was caused by the nutrient supplements. The Cardin family's motive was clear: to interfere with the Viscount's inheritance. The letter also contained evidence of collusion between the current Viscount and the Cardin family. After reading it, Lyanna discovered a harsher truth. The person who provided her with the nutrient supplements and the one colluding with her cousin were the same. It was the Duke of Cardin's mistress, the true matriarch who controlled the Cardin family. She was also Lyanna and Eudora's aunt, Arumbia. Liana struggled to accept this. Her aunt had always been supportive, even arranging accommodation for their family. It made him recall the first time he fell ill. He remembered being consumed by grief over his father's death. Suddenly, he remembered his aunt suggesting he visit the hot springs to relax. It was after that trip that he became afflicted. The evidence and memories before Liana forced her to believe that her aunt was the one who had orchestrated everything. Suddenly, Eudora stood up in a rage. She furiously cursed her aunt, claiming she had done it all for that dog, her cousin. It was because, one time, he had accidentally walked in on her aunt and cousin in a compromising position. Although he was young at the time, having read many explanatory comics, he understood what those actions meant. As she spoke, Eudora's fingers trembled uncontrollably. Without another word, she stormed out, vowing to make those two dogs regret everything they had done. Yvonne stopped her. Even if you go, what can you do? Threaten them, make them pay, or expose how they framed Liana. Doing so could land you in jail for insulting a noble. It could even endanger your entire family. Eudora stopped, tears streaming down her face. Just because my sister is cured, are we supposed to let them off the hook? I can't do it. My sister has suffered so much, and we can't do anything about it. Liana also assumed Yvonne didn't want to cause trouble. She comforted her sister, saying that a peaceful life in the future was all that mattered. Unexpectedly, Yvonne placed a hand ominously on each of their shoulders and then made a throat-slitting gesture. She had always been one to take revenge. Just making them pay isn't enough. I'm going to make those two pay back double. Even before bed, Yvonne was still poring over the intelligence reports. This was no longer just about Liana and Eudora. According to the original story, this skin disease would soon spread throughout the capital. However, she didn't believe those two were responsible for spreading the disease. It wouldn't benefit them in any way. In the original story, the ultimate beneficiary of this epidemic was Cordelia. It was she who solidified her position using the rhodia grass. So, Yvonne decided to arrange a meeting with Cordelia. She felt Cordelia wouldn't refuse, especially since she had made it clear she wasn't interested in the Crown Prince. Now, having the Duke in her heart was enough. For a moment, Yvonne fantasized about dancing with the Duke at a ball. Lost in her daydream, she didn't notice a dark shadow swooping towards her from the window, resembling a terrifying and grotesque stone golem. Its true form, however, was that of an adorable hamster. A short while ago, as Yvonne lay in bed fantasizing about dancing with the Duke, a sudden flash of lightning startled her awake. Groggily rubbing her eyes, she saw a dark shadow hurtling towards her from not far away. Yvonne shrieked in surprise and, in a moment of panic, threw her pillow. The shadow was hit squarely, letting out a cry. Seeing the familiar knocked down by her casual throw, Yvonne felt a bit puzzled. Her pillow shouldn't have that kind of power. Suddenly, she felt a faint flow of magic within her body. It must have been from drinking the Moonstone potion. To thank the Duke for his gift, Yvonne decided to properly deal with this uninvited familiar. The next morning, Yvonne woke up full of energy. The first thing she did was interrogate the creature from last night. She had locked the familiar in a food bowl. As she approached, she heard a defiant voice from inside. "How dare you lock Lord Poem in such a cramped space? Just you wait until I get out. I'll teach you a lesson." Yvonne was surprised it was still so defiant. She was about to yell back, but the familiar inside quickly caved. Last night, Yvonne had pummeled it until it was covered in bumps. It had finally given up after realizing there was no escape. It didn't want to experience that terror again. Silence fell over the food bowl. Yvonne decided to open it and take a look. She was startled. Inside was only a pink-skinned hamster, munching away happily. Realizing this cute little thing was the stone golem from last night, Yvonne couldn't help but ask, "You didn't look like this last night. And what exactly are you?" The little hamster introduced itself. "I am the great familiar, Lord Poem." Its playful movements and tone made Yvonne swoon from the cuteness. Poem, smugly, thought Yvonne had fainted from fear of its mighty name. However, in the next moment, it was firmly grasped. "Cute as you are," Yvonne said, "I still need to interrogate you. Tell me, who sent you?" Poem burst into tears. It actually didn't know who had sent it. It had been on a mission, but the contract had been severed midway, and all its memories were lost. Last night, it had only gone into the room to seek shelter from the rain. Yvonne didn't believe Poem at all. If a familiar's contract was truly broken, they usually return to their original habitat, not wander around like this. Unexpectedly, Poem looked even more grieved. He had actually tried to go back, but something seemed to be blocking him. Seeing his pitiful appearance, Yvonne wondered why other familiars looked so terrifying, while Pum, who had looked just as monstrous last night, was now so adorable. Pum explained to Yvonne that this was his true form. He wasn't supposed to reveal it in the human realm, and he didn't know why he was like this now. He finished with an impatient flick of his whiskers, urging Yvonne to ask her questions quickly. Yvonne wasn't having any of it. She stuffed Pum back into the food bowl. She didn't intend to believe him, and instead planned to use him to lure out the person behind all this. An idea struck her instantly. She was about to call Eudora and Liana to discuss it, when Eudora happened to walk in. Yvonne told her the name she had just decided on for the bath soap. The bath soap would be called Crybaby Pum, and it would feature Pum's adorable face on the label. This way, his owner, upon hearing the name, might come looking for them. But Eudora interrupted her, then pushed Yvonne towards the door, urging her to go outside and see for herself. Stepping out, Yvonne froze. Standing in the sunlight was the figure she had been longing for. His impeccably tailored suit made her heart race. The Duke, feeling the intensity of her gaze, turned his head. "Yvonne, I missed you so much." Unseen by them, a different scene was unfolding. The Crown Prince, simply because the girl he admired hadn't agreed to be his partner, was using his mother, the Empress's position to pressure her, forcing Yvonne to be his partner at the upcoming banquet. Being the Crown Prince's partner at this banquet also implied becoming his future consort. However, the Duke was completely unaware of this. The first thing he did upon returning to the capital was to see Yvonne. His purpose was to finalize the attire for the banquet as soon as possible. On the way, the Duke asked Yvonne about her favorite clothing store. Yvonne, still preoccupied with worrying about how surprised her brother would be to learn she was attending the banquet with the Duke, inadvertently made eye contact with him. Flustered and shy, she accidentally blurted out the name of the extravagant store the original Yvonne frequented. She instantly regretted it, covering her mouth with her hand. She had previously told the Duke she disliked extravagance during their dates. Now, she was suggesting such a luxurious place. Unbeknownst to her, the Duke hadn't given it a second thought. His eyes were full of Yvonne. Whatever Yvonne liked, he liked. Yvonne tried to persuade him to go elsewhere, explaining that the store was popular and usually had long queues. But the Duke reassured her, and they walked towards the store, passers-by unable to resist admiring them as a couple. Yvonne's former villainous image completely vanished beneath her radiant smile. When they arrived at the store, Yvonne found something odd. The store, usually packed with customers regardless of the occasion, was now completely empty. The Duke took her hand and explained that he had reserved every clothing store in the capital, so she could choose her dress in peace, alone with him. Yvonne's jaw dropped. She couldn't imagine the cost, and, speechless, could only compliment him on his thorough preparations. Inside, the staff enthusiastically showed them the latest trends. The Duke encouraged Yvonne to choose whatever she liked. After browsing, Yvonne's gaze landed on the menswear. Spotting a pair of black overalls, she immediately pictured the Duke wearing them. Piece after piece, it seemed everything suited him perfectly. Suddenly, she noticed a particularly extravagant outfit, seemingly designed for a wedding. Seeing Yvonne captivated by the dress, the Duke suggested she try it on. With the enthusiastic encouragement of both the Duke and the staff, Yvonne agreed. Moments later, the Duke emerged, transformed. His noble aura radiated, as if the clothes themselves recognized their rightful owner. The staff, regardless of age or gender, flocked around him, captivated. However, the next moment, Yvonne's appearance completely stole the show, enchanting even the Duke. The pristine white gown accentuated her elegance and grace. The Duke remained silent. Assuming he wasn't pleased, Yvonne turned, disappointed, to change back. But the Duke caught her hand, his handsome face close to hers. "This dress, it truly suits you." With her hands held firmly in his, Yvonne, blushing, returned the compliment, praising his attire. Their innocent, almost clumsy display of affection sent the staff into a frenzy of excitement, showering them with further recommendations. Suddenly, the sound of a musical instrument pierced the air, freezing everyone in place. Accompanied by the music, a royal messenger entered the store and knelt before Yvonne, presenting her with an invitation from the Empress. Yvonne's face instantly darkened. Opening the letter, Yvonne's suspicions were confirmed. It was an invitation from the Empress, summoning her to attend the banquet as the Crown Prince's partner. The joyful atmosphere Yvonne and the Duke had shared just moments before evaporated, replaced by bewilderment and unease. The carriage ride back was filled with silence. The Duke's expression was shadowed. The gown Yvonne held was of a style only royalty were permitted to wear. If Yvonne truly had a change of heart towards the crown prince because of this, then he, the Duke, wouldn't even have the slightest chance left. Yvonne took a deep breath and loudly denounced the crown prince's actions as childish and despicable. Only after the words left her mouth did she remember the Duke's presence. She quickly asked him to pretend he hadn't heard anything. If she could only attend the banquet as the crown prince's partner, she'd rather not go at all. The Duke chuckled softly. Yvonne's reaction completely dispelled his doubts. He advised her against ignoring the royal summons, explaining that such defiance could, at best, lead to her entire family being ostracized from society, and at worst, result in them being stripped of their title and reduced to commoners. However, if she truly didn't want to attend, he would do everything in his power to find a solution for her. The crown prince, in his selfish desire to claim Yvonne, had exploited his mother's position as empress to pressure her into accepting his invitation. His actions, however, had subjected Yvonne to unwarranted criticism. In the eyes of others, Yvonne was playing both sides, trying on clothes with the Duke while stringing along the crown prince, even requiring a personal invitation from the empress. Gossipmongers were displeased with Yvonne's perceived two-timing, believing she was merely exploiting her beauty and acting spoiled. They muttered about her terrible personality, unaware that Yvonne's brother overheard their whispers. His face darkened. "Repeat that," he growled. The gossipers scattered in terror. As for the rumors surrounding Yvonne, her brother was furious. It had to be because of her involvement with Duke Ailes. Based on his knowledge of Yvonne from their school days, she was nothing more than a bookworm obsessed with academics. That's why the men she chose were so unreliable. Duke Ailes, despite his apparent disinterest in romance, still maintained a deceptively kind facade, giving Yvonne false hope. Yvonne's brother was so angry he wanted to confront the Duke immediately. But he was also puzzled. Why would the Empress suddenly take an interest in Yvonne? He recalled the time he and his father were summoned by the Empress after Yvonne had hurt Princess Cordelia. The Empress had warned his father that any further threats to the royal family would not be tolerated. Even now, the memory sent chills down his spine. Upon returning home, Yvonne immediately informed her father about the invitation to be the crown prince's partner. Her father clenched the invitation, his face hardening, then tossed it aside with feigned nonchalance. "My dear daughter," he said, "if you don't want to go, then don't. I'll handle it." But Yvonne wasn't child. She knew that ignoring the Empress's invitation would have consequences not only for herself, but for their entire family. She didn't want her father and brother to suffer because of her. It was just attending a banquet as the crown prince's partner, she reasoned, and urged them not to worry too much. After Yvonne left, her father and brother realized she was completely unaware of the invitation's true significance. The very fact that she had received the invitation meant she was currently the strongest candidate for crown princess. Her father understood this. He took the invitation from his son and tossed it aside again. "I can't understand what those royals are thinking," he muttered. If Yvonne still had feelings for the crown prince, this might actually be a good thing. Picking up the invitation, her brother informed his father that he had heard the crown prince had personally delivered an invitation to Yvonne earlier, with Duke Ailes present. Yvonne had firmly chosen Duke Ailes. Hearing this, her father stood up in anger. That shameless wretch. Yvonne already rejected him once, and now he's using the Empress to bother her again. Seeing his father's frustration, Yvonne's brother urged him to think of a way to refuse the invitation. But her father looked troubled. Refusing the Empress's invitation could very well lead to the downfall of the Ascenthol's family. Meanwhile, the Duke was desperately searching for a solution of his own. He had gathered all the imperial law books, hoping to find a legitimate reason to decline the Empress's request. His aide told him to give up. The only remaining documents were those concerning royal traditions. But the Duke persisted, meticulously reading every word. His aide was exasperated by the Duke's stubbornness. He pointed out that even if they found something, the royal family could simply claim they no longer followed that tradition. Yet, the next moment, a smile spread across the Duke's face. He had found something. He handed the document to his aide and headed for the door. He needed to discuss this with Yvonne, but as he opened the door, he saw the butler hurrying towards him. a thick stack of letters in hand. After reading the letters, the Duke's renewed hope plummeted. It turned out that monsters had suddenly appeared in the mines, halting the extraction of magic stones. What's more, identical letters had arrived from every single mine. The Duke's aide explained that since only the mountains in the western part of the empire produced magic stones, all the mines were interconnected, like a shared destiny. Thus, the Duke resolved to take some time to deal with the monsters himself. The aide was puzzled. They already had about 300 grams of magic stones, more than enough for a gift. But the Duke insisted it was far from sufficient. Blushing, he confessed his plan. Before the banquet, he intended to present Yvonne with all the magic stones and the mines themselves as a grand gesture to ask for her hand in courtship. The Crown Prince's schemes had ultimately prevailed, though Yvonne's heart was heavy with reluctance. She had no choice but to take the Crown Prince's hand with a sorrowful expression. Suddenly, a voice called out, stopping them in their tracks. The next moment, a strong hand pulled Yvonne away from the Crown Prince and into a firm embrace. The Duke sternly addressed the Crown Prince. "Your Highness, you so cruelly rejected her before. Why force her to be your partner now?" Ignoring the Crown Prince's furious sputtering, the Duke swept Yvonne away. Yvonne was worried by this brazen display. However, before the astonished onlookers, the Duke slipped a massive magic stone ring onto Yvonne's finger, presenting the magic stones and the mines as a gift. He asked for her hand in marriage. All of this, however, was merely the aide's fanciful speculation. The Duke himself marveled at his aide's imagination. If it were that simple, he wouldn't have needed the legal document he'd just found. When his aide asked why he had specifically mentioned courting a palace maid, the Duke clammed up, saying he had a plan, but it wasn't the time to reveal it. Because of this question, the Duke promptly conscripted his aide into the monster hunting expedition. Meanwhile, Liana nervously knocked on her brother's door. After receiving permission, she entered. She had been sent by Yvonne to deliver a map detailing the monsters' locations to the young Duke. For some reason, the young Duke, engrossed in his work, looked remarkably handsome. Glancing at the map, her brother commented that Yvonne's handwriting had improved. Liana curtsied. "That's my handwriting," she said. Her brother finally looked up, taking in her appearance. Silence descended upon the room. It took a moment for him to recognize Yvonne's secretary. Seeing no scars on her face, he had mistaken her for her naive twin sister. Liana smoothly covered for him, saying it was an understandable mistake given their resemblance. Then, with a charming air, he inquired about Liana's health, commenting that her complexion looked much better. His words brought a blush to Liana's cheeks. She quickly excused herself and hurried away. Once outside, she patted her cheeks, tried to regain her composure. Meanwhile, her brother, studying the map, noticed something peculiar. For some time now, monsters have been appearing frequently near the Empire's borders. It was around the same time that the intervals between monster wars had begun to shorten. The monster war 10 years ago had caused significant damage to many neighboring countries. The Empress had stepped in, offering aid and accepting refugees. The hardest hit had been the Malay Kingdom. It was also then that the Empress had found Princess Cordelia wandering alone. It all seemed too coincidental. Next, he reviewed Cordelia's records. Found by the Empress 10 years ago, she had been returned to the Malay royal family. Later, she had come to the Empire to study. At the time, she hadn't possessed any remarkable abilities. Yet, after studying abroad, she had distinguished herself with her exceptional healing magic. She had also befriended the Crown Prince during his first monster war. Her brother couldn't help but suspect that everything had been orchestrated. Meanwhile, Yvonne had also stumbled upon crucial information. She had been fretting over being forced to attend the banquet with the Crown Prince, worried about whether the Duke could find a way to refuse the invitation. Then, she noticed a faint purple glow emanating from her drawer. Opening it, she found the diary she hadn't been able to open before. This time, she sensed a faint magical aura emanating from it, channeling her own magic into the diary. It sprang open. Curiosity piqued. She began to read about the original Yvonne's past experiences. It detailed not only her brother's repeated attempts to provoke her and his subsequent defeats, but also the original Yvonne's pursuit of the Crown Prince. Soon, her attention was drawn to a detailed account of the banquet 2 years prior, the one that had left the original Yvonne critically ill.